Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. A couple minutes behind schedule. I could have used a little bit more weekend. Maybe some of you guys could, too. Monday morning, 8:30, comes a little quick when I've got to come with a full show produced, and today was not one of those days when it was happening. So, let me be the, the second to congratulate you, to introduce you to the golden age of America. Your president did it. And I'm happy to be part of it with you as well. All of the problems that you might be thinking you have, they're not real. You might be mad at Republicans, but you're obviously not mad at the guy who's in charge of the Republican Party. That would be absurd. And there's no way that you would be mad about the president of the United States when he's a Republican, because he's not really a Republican. He kind of keeps telling you that. He kind of keeps letting you know that you can be mad at people who are not him, as long as you're not mad at him. And really, you shouldn't be mad at him because things are so good that you can barely contain it. Had an interesting couple of little social media interactions over the weekend. One was a post that I read from someone that I had not been following before, but I am now. And then my own reflections on watching a retired receiving a government pension, but also getting a private employment attorney who runs on an anonymous account that has a lot of followings over on X, a so-called conservative account, which is just to say somebody who is constantly praising and glazing this administration. And I guess someone who believes that by announcing something, it is in fact the thing. So if you proclaim that we're in the golden era, then it must be the golden era. It just doesn't turn out to be the case in reality. You can't just announce that all the bills are paid without paying your bills. That's how they repo your stuff. You can't just say that all the problems are fixed and then everything is done. Those problems will come back to haunt you. You can't say, well, we looked at the solution and we fixed all the pipes. There are no more leaks. That's how the ceiling ends up falling in on your house if you just ignore the problem long enough. A lot of people do that, by the way. It's a human reaction when you're overwhelmed by the circumstances. You just give up. And I don't want to see people give up. I do think that we should be paying attention. I also think that no one's coming to save us, which was kind of where we were at in 23, 24, when we were being told it was the most important election of our lifetimes. You guys remember that part? It's the most important election of your life. If you don't turn out and get the right people into office, then we're screwed. The nation is over. Kiss it goodbye. Off the cliff. Thelma and Louise. Blow up at the bottom of the ravine. That's what we were told. You can't keep telling people that everything they do is the most important thing. You'll end up with this thing like a cortisol overload. You'll end up with cortisol fatigue where you no longer respond to stressors. There was a very fascinating article I read about how the K-shaped economy, and we've talked about this, where the wealthy get wealthier and the poor get poorer. And they say, well, because the actual lines are growing closer together, the poor or the lower income people are actually spending more money than expected. And the wealthy are spending less. What it means is that spending is actually coming back in line, that the economy is actually leveling out, possibly. The problem is it's coming from CBS. And CBS might be one of the least honest news purveyors at this moment. They went from pretty obviously left-wing, then they started shedding a lot of their left-wing editorial bias and shedding a lot of their left-wing people, and they've gone to straight government propaganda. They're under the control of Barry Weiss, who's as far as I can tell, like a non-religious Jewish lesbian married to another lesbian, hiring pretty pro-Zionist type people. I have some evidence of this that I'll share in a moment. When you tell me that the K-shaped economy is actually coming back into line, and so that the poorer people are spending more and the richer people are spending less, and so that means that we're somehow getting back into a healthier economy, the alternative is that people have just given up. And they're like, well, this isn't real money. They're going to come and shut down my credit card at some point. I might as well grab everything I can. That's like mental looter mentality sort of thing. And that's just as likely as that everything is healing based on what I see people saying, people's actual experiences. I do see people at Costco. I do see people loading up their carts. I don't know that they're going to be able to pay their credit card bills. I know that people are leveraged with debt up to their eyeballs on a regular basis. And so when you see people that look like they're doing well, for all you know, they don't sleep at night. They have catastrophic diarrhea because of the stress, and every single paycheck could be the one that is not enough to meet their financial demands. That's just as likely based on the numbers and based on the fact that we are seeing rents and costs go up and income sort of stagnating. And so the question has been over the quote unquote $20 burrito over the last, let's say, 48 to 72 hours. Social media phenomenon. Dan Crenshaw kind of went in and said, let them eat ramen. That's a hell of a take for people who are worth a couple of $1 million. These are the same people that said, people in Congress need to trade. They're only making $175,000 a year. And so they need to be able to have access to the stock market so they can kind of make a little money for their families. The Speaker of the House said that. And we're supposed to just go, oh, okay. Does that mean that people make good financial choices? Obviously not. Have you seen what people pay in car payments? Have you recognized that people who have no money at all have a car payment? As somebody who made less than $18,000 a year as an actual grown-up, like in my late 20s, and that's what happens when you enlist in the military and shed 80% of your paycheck to go and you think that you're serving the country to go do something that you think is honorable. Maybe it is. Maybe it could be. But at $18,000 a year, still paying federal taxes, it's pretty obvious to me that I didn't have money for a car payment. So the vehicle that I bought when I got into the military cost me $1,700. I actually talked it down. The guy wanted something like $2,200. This was on a lot, a used car lot. This was the shittiest truck that they had on the lot. And it was so bad that it didn't start. And a buddy of mine who was like this redneck mechanic from Mississippi crawled underneath there with some hand tools and he rigged up the starter so that we could start it and drive it off the lot, which is what we did. $1,700. I had that in my pocket. I could go out there and pay $1,700 for the truck. And I ran on that jerry-rigged starter for 2 years before it finally melted down and I had to pay for another one for $100 or whatever the heck it costs. And then we put it in ourselves. That's what you do when you don't have any money. Meanwhile, I see people who have car insurance and their car payments topping $1,000 a month. They're paying half of what I pay in rent for a family of 6. Just to be able to drive to their job to pay for whatever the other things they have. That is not financial literacy. So when people are spending a ton more money, the odds are is that they just don't have any money at all. And they're just on the last gas. It's kind of like when you get a little surge of speed because the last little drops of fuel just dropped in and it liquidated at a higher level. And suddenly then you realize the engine seizes up. There's nothing else there. The tank's empty. I think that's just as likely as not. So we're going to be talking about this economy and how great it is. And then we're also going to tell you that the Republicans, despite all the promises and the most important election of our lifetimes, they're doing business as usual. They're just doing theater. Todd Blanche was confirmed as the Attorney General. Not shocking. It was a 100% partisan vote. Also not shocking. They can't get the Save America Act through, but Donald Trump is going to stake everything on it. The people that are talking about it are basically doing theater. They're doing voice-only votes where everyone just goes, nah, not interested in trying to secure elections. And then they're going to tell you that if you don't turn out, then communists take over and America is taken over by communists. Meanwhile, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, who looks kind of heavy these days, by the way. She was kind of a congressional thirst trap. She was cute and she was spry and she was dancy and she was curvy and she was Latina. So they put her in and she was the fresh face of the Democrat Party. And like everybody else in their 30s, she's putting on a little bit of weight. She's engaged, I thought, to some kind of weird looking ginger guy with ugly toes. That was a big scandal a couple years ago. Now she's freezing her eggs. I'll just say this, gentlemen, if you're dating a young lady who's getting less young every year, she's 36 now, I guess. If you're dating a young lady who gets less young every year and she starts freezing her eggs while you are engaged in a relationship, that's kind of like someone telling you that this is not going somewhere, so I better start storing up for the cold winter when I'm all alone and I might need to use those eggs. It's a real weird thing to do. In fact, my mother-in-law made that recommendation to my wife when we were dating. My wife was like, no, I'm seeing somebody. We're expecting to get married. And we're going to use those eggs. We're going to actually have babies, which we did. Not a good sign at 36 if you're freezing your eggs and you're actually seeing somebody, theoretically. In any case, maybe she's just trying to save up for a rainy day. Maybe she wants to sell them. AOC eggs would probably go for a premium, would they not? All right, let's get into the sponsors that are sponsoring today's show, and then we're going to get into a whole bunch of these little news stories, and we'll just see if the golden age hits you guys the way that you think it was. One of the things you may have to worry about, in addition to people, just diluting the value of your currency, is that people could steal it straight outright. There are hundreds of different data broker companies out there, and they're publishing name and family members' names and addresses and phone numbers. I've used these. They're very effective at stalking people online, e-stalking them. Anything that's been leaked out about you on the internet anywhere. It could include maiden names, which is helpful for finding out security questions, old addresses. Sometimes it's tax records or email addresses, all that stuff. It can be sitting out there unless you actively go out there and take it down. And who has the time to do that kind of thing, to be fair? And who even has the wherewithal or the know-how? If someone knows where somebody lives, they can usually find out all kinds of other things about you. They can find out when the deed changed hands. They can map out your life. This kind of research, by the way, I've done myself. I love doing this kind of thing. I've done it on people who are suing me for whatever it's worth. People can do it with bad intentions. They can do it proactively to try to screw you over. If you don't want that kind of stuff, if you don't want your information hanging around on the open internet, and then people can find out what your logons are from bank security questions and so on from the dark web, you could do something about it. You can sign up with Patriot Protect. This is what we've done. I think it actually is very, very helpful, and it's very inexpensive compared to what it could cost you. So if you want somebody that's going to go out there and scrub your internet, get all this junk off the web for you, check out Patriot Protect. The website is patriot-protect.com/Kyle. There's a link in the show description below. If you use promo code KYLE, you'll save 15% on your annual subscription. It's a couple dollars a month. You pay it one time. You forget about it until you have to renew it, and then it's not that much money again. The alternative is potentially seeing thousands of dollars in scams and then trying to get it back from your credit card company or from whoever else is billing you, or even finding out that you have false accounts that have been opened up in your name, destroying your credit and your ability to do other things you might need to do. Patriot-protect.com/Kyle. Link in the show description below. Easy enough to remember. Like I said, we've been talking about this one for a while. We'll probably have Skip on talking about some of the new cyber scams that are out there shortly. This is kind of the way that it works. Every month or so, we find out some of the other stuff on there and they update us. Check out Patriot Protect. They're one of the sponsors of the show that keeps us doing what we do. And we appreciate you guys supporting our sponsors so that I can keep doing what I'm doing here. Let's get into today's program. We'll start right now. And I'll say good morning to all of you in our chat. Yeah, we got a little start late. I recognize that. So thanks for those of you who are along. That makes you guys on time if you guys show up late. Sometimes people always, they'll pop in and they'll be 1 or 2 minutes after 8:30 my time. And they'll go, I'm late, which means I'm on time because Kyle is actually also not on time. That's true. It's the nature of the beast. This is what happens, especially on a Monday morning. I'm a forgiving boss to myself, I guess. More forgiving than I ought to be. All right, PBS News, let's lead it off. How about Todd Blanche? Congratulations, Mr. Attorney General. You've been narrowly confirmed as the Attorney General. It was done in an overnight vote over the weekend. We found out about it on Saturday morning. The Senate confirmed Todd Blanche as Attorney General in an early Saturday morning vote, cementing Donald Trump's former personal attorney in command of the Justice Department. Correct. Great. The Republican-led Senate got a vote of 50 to 49. That is the new normal. The new normal is, even though Republicans voted overwhelmingly to confirm even Joe Biden's people, we're now going to do a 50-50 split with plus or minus 1 or 2 on either side to be able to make major important decisions. This is representative of a broken Senate. I don't see Republicans talking about this. I've seen zero political ads about this problem. I don't know why we continue to act like you're going to somehow be able to vote your way out of it when the mechanisms that are in place already and the actual selection process for the people who are going to make the proxy vote for us. Remember, we have a Democratic republic. Our republic says we have a representation. We outsource our actual vote with a down the line vote. So every single major national policy is done through a distilled vote. You have a congressperson and you have a senator. The senator is not supposed to actually represent you. The senator's job is to represent your state's interests. They don't do that anymore. People don't even recognize that that's the case. I don't know if they're teaching civics to young children anymore because my kids are not in government schools. But theoretically, you're supposed to know that one represents the masses and the other represents the states. And the states are a distillation of multiple votes that you've made at your state level. They go to the state houses, and at your national or your state capital, they make decisions to send off senators. That's how the system was created. When you change the rules of the game mid-game, are there any games where you're like, hey, what if we just did things differently because we want to do something differently? Let's change the structure of the game and then see if the game still works. And then you go, well, it seems awfully lopsided. It seems like whoever has the ball continues to win, especially if it's a score and then you get to take the ball back again. And if you do rules that favor whoever has the ball, is it a chance that the defense ever gets the ball again? Maybe they never get it again. Then you start thinking, well, this is not a good rule change. The 17th Amendment was a bad rule change for America. And we are seeing the long, long distillation of what happens after the changed rules end up in its sort of end state. The end state is completely non-functional mechanisms of government. And so what the answer that people keep posting is, well, we just need the right candidates. We just need to get the right people in office. It's like you misunderstand. The institution is not what it was designed to be. So how on earth would it ever work? You're not even supposed to be able to vote for the president. Do you guys realize that? My friends in the chat this morning, we went over this a whole bunch. It was actually redetermined. It has been reestablished by the Supreme Court that your ability to vote for the president is only at the pleasure of your state. There's no constitutional mechanism that says you're supposed to be able to pick, because the president's not supposed to matter that much. But it turns out the president actually does matter in our current system. We can't deny that something actually exists. So I want to go back to something that we were lampooning pretty endlessly on Friday's show. It was a discussion of what is going on in the economy. Apparently, there's a famous skit that was done by the Three Stooges. If any of you know what the name of that skit is about money and the Federal Reserve and so on, I've never seen it. I've seen plenty of Three Stooges. I've never seen any of this stuff. But apparently, the writers over at Fox Business set this up. We kind of made fun of this lady for all the things she was saying, because I don't believe that a pretty blonde lady with dark eyes and dark roots and bleach blonde bottle hair is saying things that she independently knows and thinks about, because I've seen what Fox is. I've seen what our mainstream media does. It's a propaganda machine to make you either feel good about what's going on or to have people who are smarter than the people whose faces are on the camera type up stuff, put it on a teleprompter, and then it gets read back at you. And you regularly find out that those people don't actually know what they're reading. They look ridiculous. And then crazily enough, if they read that stuff enough times, so they have the meta-analysis from somebody else who actually did the thinking, then did the writing, then someone did the reading and the interpolation and understanding, and then they did the typing, and then you're just the face of that particular message. If you do it long enough, then people start thinking you're an expert. We have a lot of folks that are in news media who have almost no real-world life experience. They've never run businesses. They've never been involved in any of the actual mechanisms of commerce that they comment on endlessly. They're not successful in any of this stuff. The only thing they do is they talk about it and make money. And that might sound rich coming from someone like who's sitting here, but this is a relatively new thing for me, sitting in a studio space and talking about anything, because most of my life has been based on actual experience myself. And I don't have all the experience, for sure. You want to talk about restaurants? I've run restaurants. I've run smaller businesses. I've worked in business sales. I've sold tens of millions of dollars worth of technologies. I've sold advertising. I've seen what people spend advertising on. I've watched up and down economies. I have enough money that when my job went away, when the career that I chose disappeared, I didn't go broke and my children weren't starving, although it was rough. I have some life experience, whatever that is. I've dug some ditches. My hands are not soft, generally. They're softer than they probably could be. Right? A lot of these people have never done anything, and they go out there and they pontificate on it. I don't know what the background of the first guy is, nor the second lady. I know that they're just getting information that somebody else typed up on a teleprompter, and they're not even embarrassed by it. And the pay is good to talk about things in which they don't know. Maybe this disconnect from the commentary class to the actual human beings, there's a reason why you hear the Why you hear the British refer to them as TV presenters. It's acting. Presentation. There's an online personality. I don't even know what else to call her. And her name is Angela something, starts with a B. It's like a forgettable name. And she did this whole bit. I think we've even played some of her clips back in the day. The so-called bold lib. She's like, I'm a bold lib and I'm in my 40s and I am, have no children so I can go out and party all night long. Well, there was obviously someone behind the camera the whole time. Apparently, she's married. She's been married for like 16 years. 0 children. That is kind of a bold lib move, isn't it? If you get married and you've been married for a decade and a half and you have no children and you don't plan on having children, and then suddenly you're in your 40s and you're like, oh, what if I could have kids? I got the baby fever. We were designed to do certain things. All of those things came from this poison that was planted over the last, 40, 50, 60 years. Like our society has gotten really gross. So I want to go over this post by a guy named Roman, what is it called? Roman Helmet Guy? Roman Helmet Guy. Yeah. I'm gonna read a post after we do a quick little bit on the economy as described on Friday's show without my interruption this time. And then I'm gonna read something about where the debate is getting lost, because there's a cultural debate and there's people who are so out of touch with the reality of like the rubber meets the road. They have no idea what it is they're talking about. And that's why they can smile about it, I suppose, on Fox Business.
It's not hard to think about that famous skit from the Three Stooges when thinking about how our Federal Reserve deals with banks, the federal government. It's a weird thing, right? Kelly O'Grady's got more. Kelly.
Charles, I wish it worked like that when I owe people money. That's a nice definition of even. But you watch that and it makes you think of the effort by Powell and company to slow down the economy by draining money from it, right? They've tried to do it through higher interest rates, not buying bonds or mortgage-backed assets, while allowing those they do own to mature. So on paper, this should have slowed the economy, but it hasn't to the degree advertised. And one reason is the role of reverse repurchase agreements, right? You agree to sell a security, you buy it back at a higher price, and that reverse repo puts money back out there. So look at this, okay? A pot of $2.5 trillion that the banks parked at the Fed has been coming at a rapid pace. The reverse repo drawdown has occurred at a faster pace than the Fed has been drawing down on its balance sheet, right? This is going down more than this is, that rate there. And so to put some numbers behind it, you go back to roughly, the summer of 2022, $2 trillion has come out of reverse repos, but the Fed's balance sheet is only down by $1.3 trillion. So more money is going out than is coming back in. And so that right here, you see the liquidity that the Fed was actually supposed to drain is on the rise again. Okay, so then there's that late October victory lap, the pivot that the Fed was all excited about. Not only were investors watching, but so were consumers, right? You look at this spike right here, people started to get more optimistic about their current and future financial situation. But now the Fed is dealing with a rebound in some key inflation data. So this is the CPI equivalent of the PCE Supercore. Shows inflation if you strip out energy, housing, goods. In January, the month-over-month rate started increasing again, right? That means inflation is stickier than the Fed wants it.
All of that sounds really nice, and it's a lot of words. I played this for my wife. My wife is a regular person who is my sounding board on sanity. She's like, I don't know what any of that means. What does that mean? And I went, it doesn't mean anything. It's just people talking about numbers on a graph because they're trying to manipulate perceptions. They're trying to act like some sort of aggregate thing has nothing to do with regular people. Here's a great story about a regular person. Americans got their biggest raises in 40 years. Inflation took most of it. That's that sticky inflation. Sticky inflation means that you lost money. That's what it means. Why are they saying it in a nice way? It reminds me of the Robin Hood Men in Tights thing, and I can't find the clip. I have it sitting somewhere on my computer, where he's like, maybe you'll tell me the bad news in a nice way, right? Mel Brooks moment. The reality of it is that, you guys in the chat, a bunch of Americans are experiencing being stricken.
Stricken. You're stricken. Poverty stricken.
They're feeling poorer. Meanwhile, the president of the United States said something really lovely, didn't he? He said he wants to make sure that the people who feel wealthy for the first time can continue to feel wealthy by having this artificially higher value assigned to their home. What a crazy thought. And it tells me the man is completely detached from reality. If I came up to you and you bought a house, I don't know, you paid, let's say you paid $350,000 for it. And then 2 years later, I came up to you and I said, you know what? It's incredible. You've been living in that house and now it is worth $425,000. And you'd be like, oh my. Well, I haven't done anything to it. I haven't added any sweat equity. I didn't put a new shop on the back part of the property, and I haven't done any gardening, and I haven't done any major renovations into here. It's incredible. My house is now worth more money just because I'm so awesome that I own it. And then I come to you in a couple of years later and I go, it's now worth $550,000. Great purchase for $350,000. Your $550,000 home now. And you're like, oh, wow, I have so much money living in this $550,000. Look at me, king on the castle. I have a $550,000 house. It's worth $200,000 more. How many of you have ever bought a house and sold it for a bunch more and gone like, with doing nothing to it, nothing substantial? I've taken houses and gutted them from the inside out and sold them for slightly more than I paid for them and broke even on it. I did that when I was in Virginia. I sold my second house in Virginia after having done almost everything you could do. We repainted. I did the entire basement. It started off with carpet and ugly. I put in bamboo flooring, and I did the backyard at a crazy level. We brought in a huge retaining wall, and we did a terrace, and I built up this like light rig, and there was a block for putting in I poured concrete for the first time in my life. I bought a freaking concrete mixer. I was pouring concrete. I poured thousands of pounds of concrete in the back. Put in concrete stairs because it used to have these slippery, dangerous, horrible wood ones. And then you end up selling the house for more. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I spent $10,000 on a driveway and $15,000 on pavers to get the entire side yard done. And, another $15,000 in the backyard. And then you end up selling it for another $100,000. And you're like, oh, okay, well, my sweat equity, because I had the cash to outlay and build this thing up. Yeah, it's good. Good to go. I spent some money and it made some money. That makes some sense. How about the typical American paycheck grew faster since 2019 than any stretch since the early 1930s, but that money meant nothing? That feels terrible. And that's what the story from CBS is pointing out. And I think this is where people are starting to get the rubber meets the road. You can make more money than you've ever made before in your life, and it means nothing. You're just keeping pace with the economy, which is devaluing the currency you have. CBS News analysis of census data has found that the typical full-time worker earned $1,250 a week in the first half of 2026, and that's up $342 from the year before the pandemic, a raise of 38%. But that our prices climb nearly as fast. If the average American worker made $342 more per week, what is that, about 50? Is that about $50 per day more? And you're spending $50 a day more? Then what have you done? What have you gained? The prices climbed nearly as fast. Consumer costs rose 29% over the same 7 years, swallowing 80% of these typical workers' wages. I actually think it's probably way worse than that because all of these numbers are favorable to somebody else. What survives is a roughly $70 more per week on today's dollars, which are worth far less. So that $70 isn't $70 from 7 years ago. That's about 6% over 7 years gained on each year. So then you see these graphs. These graphs are really damning. And by the way, these are only if you take the most rosy view. Typical weekly pay up 37.7%, consumer prices up 30%. Those are on the consumer prices that they are actually tracking. That's not all the things. I read another article talking about how Americans basically made another $1,000 per year. Manufacturing jobs brought up about $4,000 per year. We did the quick math on the costs of gasoline, just where we are right now. And my wife, who doesn't have to take children to school, doesn't commute to a ton of sports, doesn't do anything like what my mother used to do. My mom used to drive 100 miles plus a day easy in a Suburban to be able to take kids all over the place. So she was spending a fortune in gas. For what my wife does in our minivan, which is a fuel efficient 28, miles per gallon little people mover, and our grocery store is 3 miles away. It's a 6-minute drive tops. We have all kinds of things within our... I can walk to Costco where I live now. They just built a Costco within walking distance. It would be a long walk. It would suck in Texas. But I can walk to Costco. And we're spending about $750 more per year based on the average we spend in driving per week. We don't do that much driving. We drive to church. We go out to eat once a week as part of our family deal, where we go out and have pizza. It's pretty inexpensive. They go to the gym, this little like gymnastics thing. We go to the store and we drive to fill up with gas. Like, that's it. We don't do that much. For those of you that are actually driving a lot more than that, which is almost everybody I know that has young children, $100, $750 more a year, it's way more than that for you. A ton more than that. And that doesn't even take into account the increase in the cost of food, which is going crazy. And then it's going to get worse as the downstream effects of increased transportation costs and so on get built into this food. It's nutty, right? If my family, if the average American family is making $1,000 more a year, which is what the president's advisors on the National Economic Council are saying, and we've eaten up $750 of that just in gas prices with very, very minimal transportation. You wonder why people are frustrated and feel like they're getting screwed over. They are getting screwed over. Over 7 years, $70 more a week is a small gain in the context of a typical American family budget, with one gasoline fill-up of an SUV or less than a third of a single week's grocery run for a single cost-conscious family of four. One of the ugliest things that I think has happened over the last couple years has been a general instinct that you cannot afford to have a family, and you should wait until you're in a financial position to do so. Don't have babies unless you can afford it. Be responsible. This is the whole argument that was being made in Idiocracy. It just isn't the right time yet. You look at the economy, you look at the world events that are going on, you look at the uncertainty, and you decide, well, we're just going to hold out. And the saddest thing is a bunch of capable, eligible, otherwise like should be getting married parents are not. They're not getting married and they're not having babies. So the system is going to collapse in and on its own weight because the system was designed to continue to replenish itself. And that is why we have this constant stream and argument for, can we get third world immigrants into this country? I'm going to read this thing from Roman Helmet Guy, whatever that is. Post went viral. Very interesting to me. First, I'm going to read you what Dan Crenshaw says. Because Dan Crenshaw, who sounds like he has plenty of money, is crying about the quote-unquote $20 burrito debate. This is the same guy who pointed out, not just a couple years ago as he was running for office, that food prices were up and it was the Biden administration's fault. Here's what he says. Just hearing about this dumb $20 burrito debate, so I just thought I'd make some losers on social media angry before going to bed. This is a very useful thing for somebody in Congress to be doing. Oh well, he's out. Stop whining. Get a job. Eat ramen like the rest of us did in college on a budget with 4 roommates. The market doesn't care what you think something should cost. Only communists care. They set prices, remember? And then everyone starves, remember? Are you a communist? Or are you an American adult male capable of handling his own shit? And they give some commentary here saying, hey, Dan Crenshaw, you cried about the Biden administration doing the same thing. Here's an alternative perspective from a younger person. And I don't know what the age of this guy is because it's kind of like an anon account. But I think it hits home. And I'm going to share with you my own post on the same thing. Because I took it out of the realm of just the today's materialism, and I tried to look for root causes. I'm interested in why our Senate doesn't work. I can trace it back to a root cause, a break-off point. Amusingly, having just watched watched the Back to the Future trilogy with my kiddos, they keep going back to this point. Like, where did everything go wrong? You can oftentimes find where it went wrong. It doesn't mean you can fix it. In fact, I think the entire point of that movie is that we get to the point where we realize, oh, these things go wrong all the time. The only thing you can do is identify the cause and try to correct whatever the underlying cause was today and see if you can straighten out the course. But you can't change the past, even if people would like to. And if you do, you screw up even more things. Here's what Roman Helmet Guy had to say. Just take this for a minute, because there's a lot of people. This is the I'm going to buy everything because they're going to come and repo it in a few minutes anyway attitude. And I don't think that he is unique in saying this. And the fact that millions of people saw this makes me believe that he is in fact correct. Quote, if I hear another boomer conservative bitching about Gen Z ordering DoorDash, I'm going to become a communist. It's true that their grandparents always cooked homemade meals, but that's because grandma stayed home. And grandpa had a union job, and nobody could reach him until after 5 p.m. They had a house with a full kitchen and 3 kids by the age of 25. Meanwhile, half of Gen Z men are forced to compete with the entire population of South America for some 12-hour-long shift HVAC job that barely pays the rent. They're 30 years old. No one cooks for them because they can't find any woman who will marry them when they can't even afford a starter home in the ghetto. And the other half of Gen Z men are busting their ass to compete with the entire populations of India and China for some 70-hour-a-week PowerPoint job that asks them to update the slides at 3 a.m. They can't find anyone to cook for them either because every woman around them is convinced that being a mother and cooking for a man is beneath them because they're going to save the world when they become the vice president of marketing at Megacorp in about 20 years. What an ugly moment to be alive and see that and recognize that the world is not a great place for a lot of young people coming in. And then the ugliest thing is people who are like Dan Crenshaw, I guess he's a Gen Xer if I had to guess, people who are elder millennial types looking at them and saying, let them eat ramen. That's what we did. Bootstrap yourself. And I do think that people make bad financial decisions. I see it all the time. I do think that people overspend and they don't tighten their belts and they go on vacations and think they're entitled to things they shouldn't be. But what about the cultural problem that exists that is deeply ingrained in my generation that came from the generation before me? And so I had a conversation with my mother about this yesterday, and I'm going to share with you guys some of the thoughts that I had about it and some of the ugliest things that didn't originate in the generation before mine, but they have come due, like the manifestations of a lot of the evil that took place in my generation's sort of like upbringing. It was planted before. And that probably came from their parents too. So when I heard people like Ron Coleman tell me, hey, we're not mad at boomers, or we shouldn't be, we should be mad at the greatest generation because they really weren't great. They kind of ignored everything and they went to work and they put their heads down and their kids just went wild and did all kinds of things. And then those things grew up into what we're dealing with today. He might be right. I think a lot of the issues are 100-something years old, which means that there's nobody alive today who's to blame for this stuff. And yet being calloused and saying, screw you, without recognizing what's happening in this exact moment, that's where Donald Trump sits as the president of the United States, talking about everyone actually loves me. I'm insulated. I'm so insulated because I have so much money and so little concern for regular people that you can't even convince me that people don't like me and they don't like what I'm doing, despite the obvious evidence to everyone who's not Donald Trump that this is a problem. If you guys are watching on Rumble, you could do us a favor. You can hit the like. It'll move us onto the leaderboard. I don't know what I get out of that. Actually, I just know that Bob the Gamer, who's one of our watchers over on Rumble, always lets me know whether or not we made it on the leaderboard. And when we don't, it's very upset. So if you guys want to help us out there, if you want to bump us up on YouTube, by the way, the difference between Rumble and YouTube, I should just tell you guys, just since we're talking money, I think I made $213 on Rumble with about 500,000 views last month. And we got paid 4 times that much for about 60,000 views on YouTube. YouTube views are worth so much more just for being there. Their monetization capabilities is so much higher. Watch wherever you guys like. Make sure you have a backup channel. Sometimes one of them fails. YouTube failed, I think, the other day. Rumble does on a regular basis, glitches out and gets weird. Subscribe to the channels. Make sure you guys have notified if you want to watch us live. You can pretty much avoid all the ads by doing that. I don't think we make any money on it, but I love seeing you guys in the chat in the morning, so I appreciate you guys. And then you may hear an ad over on the audio platforms, and I'll leave a space for it right here. And that's generally speaking your warning that there's going to be some sort of ad, which may be louder than you like. There's apparently a button on Spotify that you can choose to normalize the ad volume. I don't know about this stuff, but those of you who listen on Spotify told me that. KyleSeraphinShow.com is how you get there. Very easy to do. I want to read maybe the response that I had, because the dangerous thing is forgetting the root cause piece. And so this, for me, for being suppressed on social media, went kind of viral. This was something I just kind of typed up. I thought, what are all the problems? Am I individually assigning this to any person who says I'm a boomer? No. In fact, some boomers don't even know they're boomers. And baby boomers is the longer version of it. It's just easier to say boomer. The conversation I had with my mother involved, you didn't even know that you were a baby boomer until about a year ago. And she's like, you're right, I didn't. She's like, now it bugs me because I know. I didn't previously know. So just saying, I'm not individually accusing anybody. There's this post that I had, about 100,000 people took a look at it. It was fairly well received. It was a response to another sort of let them eat cake, let them eat ramen sort of thing from this anonymous account that's a retired military guy and an attorney who clearly is not worried about money. As somebody with young children, I'm not just worried about money for me, because I just don't, it's not really about that. It's about looking into the future and seeing that my children are going to inherit a crappier America than I did. And for the first time, that seems to be the standard. where a lot of younger Americans are looking at giving America that is worse than they got it. That's an awful feeling. It really is. It's really sad. And so you can see where those seeds were planted. I do think it was probably planted before the boomers generation. That being said, I think the things that went on while boomers were coming of age. So if you were born after World War II and before whatever the cutoff is, 1963 or something like that, 62, 63, if you were born in that category, you grew up with some things and your generation normalized some things. You didn't create it, but these things did pop up and they're very ugly. And they have, in sort of concert with each other, I think they have really destroyed what the beauty was of this country. The things that we are nostalgic for when we say make America great again, the things that we were looking for involved a country that was faithful to God. And people had different definitions of it, and they went to different denominations of Christianity, but it was a Christian God, by and large. I grew up with knowing maybe 0 Jewish people my whole life until I was a grown-up. It just wasn't common, even in California, even in a place where Jewish people were. I didn't know if they were Jewish. I didn't know what that was. Everybody I knew went to some variety of Christian church. And when I moved to Texas, it was the same thing. You go to Missouri, you go to Kansas. It's the same thing. The only places that I knew that Jewish people was like New York City. And when I was a kid, my dad told me New York City is where the assholes live. So that's the only thing I knew about it when I was growing up. And it turns out some of those asshole people are Jewish. Not exclusively that, but like that's the place. It was a far off place. It was a fantasy idea. There was big buildings and, there was a Statue of Liberty and I had never been there. It didn't matter. Here's what I wrote. So the boomer generation walked away from God. And even though some of you, maybe many of you listening here, go to a church, have a belief in God, I got a bunch of responses from people saying, well, I believe in an entity. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the problem. So just so you know, I'm deliberately saying that is a problem. And it's not a problem for me. It's a problem for you. It's an awful way to live. And it turns out it has some manifestations downline. The boomer generation normalized divorce. This might be the single most damaging thing in all of this because it leads to the decision that killing the unborn is a right. And I had someone push back and say, we didn't invent abortion and we didn't invent divorce. You're correct. You did not. But it became normal while you were a young adult into an adult. And there's a direct correlation with saying that marriage is no longer permanent and then deciding that children are no longer necessary or interesting or allowed to even live sometimes. That's wild. That also comes from this embrace of feminism. And women became not just common in the workplace, but essential to the point where a woman's place is in the workplace. This multiple different aspects of feminism evolving. And it evolved very quickly into something truly ugly to the point where stay-at-home moms are looked down upon. When they're providing what? The most important central relationship with their own children? I said the wild thing, and this is something that my generation has obviously inherited, and so have the generations thereafter, but I don't know that it started there. I actually think it started before. It started in my parents' generation. And I don't think my parents were these people. I think my parents were very selfless. They're actually listening right now, so that's fine. I think they lived for children, and that became less and less common. And I've seen it in the parents of my friends, watching the way that they interacted and the way that they prioritized their own stuff. A lot of my parents' friends lived for themselves. And the ones that I ended up being closest friends to had similar values. My parents and their parents had similar values. This is the way that we find our tribes. But there was a prioritization of me and my happiness over the next generation, which is different than basically the entire American dream. The thing that made America great and the thing that people thought of as making America great is that people took incredible risks to get to America. They put everything on the line for the next generation, knowing that they would maybe not even experience the greatness of that thing, that seed that they planted, and the next generation might be able to harvest it. And then hopefully they would plant it and grow it into something else. And then you can simply look at what that mindset does. Government, which was overwhelmingly boomers in government, in positions of power, so almost none of you listening fit into this category, but the people that you put there or that you allowed to be there because we didn't throw it off. And I'm not saying that elections were any more real, but they were probably more real before 2001, before we went to machines. There was a lot more chance that it was real. There was 3 times more government debt in the last 30 years than the previous 200 years or more combined. That's wild. That's a wild thought, to think that we went from under $10 trillion in debt to $40 trillion in debt while my generation was just getting out of the house and just stepping into the workforce. So it's worth knowing that there's an enormous, enormous burden that is being thrown on young people. And then the worst thing, and this is the Dan Crenshaw thing, this is the cynical Publius below, this is Donald Trump. The worst thing is that there's a sense that the stake that the children and the grandchildren of baby boomers, that their happiness is not actually something that has anything to do with the generation, like the oldest generation. And that is obviously not going to be the case for people who have similar values that listen to the show. The odds are, if you listen to the show and you tolerate listening to the things that I have to say, you're not walking around going, yeah, screw young people, screw my children, screw their children. That just doesn't really work for you. Because it'd be a lot of cognitive dissonance. I mean, good for you if you actually listen to this and you think like, yeah, I listen to you and I take what I want from it, and that's where you're at. But there's something to be said for the first American generation to hand a shittier country to their children and their grandchildren. And then I said the contemptible belief that it's someone else's fault and that I have no stake in it, that I don't care what happens to my offspring. That can only happen when you focus in on yourself, which is very selfish, and it's actually a really juvenile instinct. And it's the opposite of a biblical way of living. I had a woman post something this morning or yesterday, I guess, when I was on my way after church. Get there, and she said, I'm really sad because my fiance said that we're not going to go on cruises and vacations after we have children. I have 4 kids. Going on cruises and vacations sounds like an absolute nightmare, not just because of the cost, which is very, very high. It's extremely expensive. It costs me $100 for breakfast when I'm out on the road with my kids. For breakfast, the cheapest meal of the day. For like eggs and some sausage, $100 for 6 of us to sit down. That's not that much money, I guess, but it feels like a lot because I remember when $100 was a really, really nice meal. Long and short, she's crying about that. It's like, yeah, that is, but the reason is because when you have children, then you start putting the things that you used to do aside, and then you move into a new phase of life that are much more adventurous and much more interesting. Nothing makes me want to get on a floating diarrhea palace with a bunch of strangers who have unlimited booze. Hanging out with my kids at the lake 15 minutes down the street from me is infinitely more interesting. So you start putting different priorities up. This is funny that people think that they're going to be young forever, that the values that they have when they're in their 20s are going to be the same that they have when they have children. And hopefully they're not, because then you'll raise some crazy kids. In any case, this idea that we are pitting generation against generation, it's not that anybody wants to say you're terrible or bad because of like whatever age you are. That's absurd. The question is what is the root of the problem? Where did those values go awry? And can we refocus? And I think there are some young people that are refocusing, but they're competing against the entire third world for manual labor jobs, and they're competing against all of Asia and India for jobs that are in an office building. So that stress didn't exist even when I was coming out of school. They were just starting to move these people in to the point where today I walk out of my house and 70% of my neighborhood is owned by people that are non-American citizens that don't speak English as a first language. And they came here and they make tons of money in jobs that young Americans would fight to have. And who sold them out? Our politicians have sold them out. And the messaging that comes out of our White House, that comes from the National Economic Council, is disgusting. It's truly tone deaf. So you're going to see people just tune out. They're going to walk away and say, I'm going to spend everything I have. You can come repo it when you want. Forget your K-shaped economy. I'm not even going to participate in anything. I'm going to use this fake money on a card, which, I'm old enough to remember when nobody had a credit card. Nobody bought anything with a credit card. The idea that a credit card was accepted for anything was sort of novel at places. People were like, oh, well, this business accepts credit cards. In my lifetime, we've gone from if you have money, you can buy something. And if you don't have money, you can't have that thing, to we'll just saddle ourselves up with debt indefinitely. And then we'll just pay service payments on something that we can't afford. And so I've watched people do that, and it looks like a trap. It looks like a trap on people that can't calculate the numbers. To say that that is all good and fair, and then you got $1,000 more a year, so you should be grateful to the guy that's in the White House. That is not a message that leads to anything good. I think whatever the digital age equivalent of guillotines is sort of inevitable if you're going to sit and tell people that you suck and it's your own fault, that this 100-year tidal wave that's been slowly coming at you. It's my wife's analogy. I think it's very, very good. It's the equivalent of walking out your door every single day and watching the wave get taller and taller. And it's at the horizon, but you know it's getting closer and closer. And one day it may just fly at you at 100 miles an hour. I don't know how fast it's going to hit, but there's an obvious tidal wave, a tsunami of bad consequences from 100 years of shitty decision-making in government and personal decision-making and values-driven, and our society sort of just not paying attention. And that's what a nation under judgment looks like. Like, you guys could go back, for anybody that's ever read the Bible, go read the Old Testament and watch the cycle. When you get away from the value system, the inevitable result is foreigners will rule you in your own land. You will find yourself under the thumb of people who have shitty values because they're pointing out that if you want to live under shitty values, you can live under foreigners. This is God's cycle. And everybody sort of thinks that the people that are in the Old Testament, that they're not the modern day state of Israel. I don't think so. I think that if you're a Christian, you have to understand that the covenant evolves. You're that person. So you're living according to bad values and you get to be under judgment, and we're going to eat the consequences. Imagine being several generations deep into Egyptian slavery and wondering, what is it that we have done wrong? Was it us? Probably not. Paying for the sins from the previous and the things that they showed you and all the pagan sacrifice and all the other garbage that went along with it. So you should be optimistic, allegedly. Again, this is the most gilded thing you can do. We talked about the Gilded Age on Friday. This is the gilding that is going on. It's fool's gold. It's fake. It's gold in the paint. It's just on the outside. And far too many people are sitting there looking at the tidal wave and they're trying to say, isn't it nice? This is the White House essentially saying, isn't it nice? For once you get to work in the shade. And we're going, I think the shade is because there's 100-foot tall wall of water that's about to crush our entire existence. But I guess the shade is nice temporarily. Here's the window dressings that they're putting up on this thing.
Okay, let's start with a couple of polls. On the condition of the economy, what folks told us is 76% of them say it's fair or poor. And when we asked about their personal financial situation, the largest number came in from those who report they are falling behind. We have talked about this before. When can Americans expect relief?
I want you to focus in on the smugness of this man's face.
Well, we've already seen that real wages under President Trump, which is wages after inflation, have gone up about $1,000 for the typical American middle-class family.
You hear the way that he just delivered that? I'm gonna do a little quick meta in this. The way that you heard it sounded like he was kind of talking through his nose, and he was a little bit tight. It's the way that my daughter talks when she's saying something she knows is kind of embarrassing. It's the way that Candace Owens speaks when she's saying something that she knows is false. It's the same way that Daniel Bongino says it. We all do this, by the way. It's called an adenoidal delivery. If you've ever listened to people and you have any sort of instinct to listen to the sound of the words and not just the words, the actual delivery is critical. Adenoidal delivery is when I'm saying something that I'm embarrassed about or that I know would be embarrassing to hear on the other end. And so all of the structures in the soft palate and in the back of the mouth, they change. They change shape and the form. And so the actual delivery of the words is not your normal delivery. You guys can look this thing up. Adenoidal delivery. Enjoy this bit here. This is Kevin Hassett. He's the director of the National Economic Council. This is a position that was created in 1993 in the White House. It is the economic advisor for the president. And he is saying things to you with a look on his face that I would describe as smug. I don't know any other way to do it. And the actual words that come out of his mouth come out as though he is actually discrediting the words with his delivery. Enjoy. By the way, Mike Davis does this almost everything he says.
And about $4,000 for the typical manufacturing worker or construction worker. And so people are making more money than, they're having to pay at higher prices. But the prices went up so much under Joe Biden, we totally understand why people are still frustrated when they go to the grocery store. I go to the grocery store myself, and I'm just stunned still at the price of beef and other products.
Did you notice that he was shaking his head left to right, sort of micro delivery of sort of discrediting the things he says? Who's ever smiled and said, well, I go to the grocery store and I can't imagine. I mean, it's so expensive. The things there are just wildly cost. He has a net worth of $7.5 million on the low end based on the estimates that he has to submit for his position in public office. So he's worth at least $7.5 million, just so you know who's talking to you.
But the bottom line is that if you want to have higher welfare for American people, then you need factory construction, you need lots and lots of job creation and machine purchases. And so right now, as an example, we've got 83,000 or so people building new factories in the U.S. because of Trump's economic policies. And we've got the highest investment data that we've ever seen. All the way in March was like the best month ever. So that
every single thing he's saying, he's moving his head from the left to the right, all the way through it.
they're putting machines in the factories, and as those factories turn on, then we're going to have more construction jobs, more manufacturing jobs. And again, those are average wages of $4,000. Under Joe Biden, manufacturing wages, I'm not filibustering, I'm about to end. Under Joe Biden, manufacturing employment went down 233,000 workers, and wages dropped for the typical American family by $3,000. Now we've got to make up, like, so we're plus 1,000, he was minus 3, but we're making progress.
So was all of that just kind of full of shit? You delivered it in such a way that was very discredited by your own body. Your body betrayed you, that you didn't believe the things you were saying. And we can listen to you and we can hear it and we just go, yeah. I don't think you believe that. You just said 83 or 86,000 people are involved in building factories. That is a deniable amount of people in America. We've also found out that some of the people that are building those factories are here illegally, or they're illegal. They're employed in ways that they are not allowed to be actually employed. We just found that out when they started off the enforcement actions under Donald Trump's first couple of weeks when he was getting after it. Remember, they found that there were tons of South Koreans that were building things, and Donald Trump made excuses and said, well, it's very sophisticated. You can't teach Americans how to build sophisticated battery systems. That's why you have to bring them in from South Korea. So how many of these 86,000 factory workers are actually, in fact, building factories that are from America? Are those actually even American jobs? We found out that on Friday, the economy shed 23,000 jobs. It shed them. And we were making light of it because there's nothing else you can do except laugh about the fact that the media jumps in on these terminologies and says, well, we're all going to agree that it shed jobs. Shedding jobs equals financial catastrophe for a person who used to have a job, used to have a paycheck, wakes up and says, I'm either no longer needed, my company is no longer solvent, or that whatever I worked, it's not even going to get paid because there's no money in the bank to be able to pay it. Because the company used my labor, poorly invested, got screwed over on a tariff thing, and the tariff went to somebody upstream. But you got shed. It's a very callous way of saying that you don't have a job anymore. It's like when my buddies and I talk about being canceled from federal law enforcement. There are not very many jobs where you're supposed to be able to have like a lot of longevity in it. And you kind of do this. You do this little trade-off. The trade-off is, I'm going to work for less money. There's less money in government work, by the way, than private sector. That's definitely the case. So you don't do it because you think you're going to be the most wealthy. You do it because it's the most stable. The government prints the money, so theoretically it has the money to give you. Sometimes they don't, fund the government, so you may go without a paycheck, but they always make it up at the end. It's a stable thing. And at the end of it, they reward you with a pension. There's not very many pensions that are out there in the world. It used to be the standard. People who grew up as boomers, people who grew up watching their parents from the generations prior, silent generation, greatest generation, etc. They saw their parents get the gold watch, whatever the hell their equivalent was. They got a check for the rest of their life. The company said, not only are we going to pay you, but we're going to take some of the things that you are earning as part of your benefits package. We're going to invest it in something of value. And so you're going to be taken care of. So when you no longer work here, you're no longer a problem for anybody. Congratulations. You've achieved financial freedom. You get to go on and live your golden years in a certain way. You can do whatever the hell you want. People retired at 60 years old, 62 years old, 63 years old. By the time they were in their 50s, they were starting to really cash out of things, and they had kids, they had houses. Like, One income. Maybe they had two incomes. Maybe they were like my grandparents. They had two pensions from two solid companies, both sort of like infrastructure type companies. One in the telco world, the other one in the oil and gas world, electric. And you're like, oh, yeah. Did they have a lot of education? No. Did they show up to work? Yeah. Was the job that they did even that valuable? I have no idea. I have no idea if it was that valuable, if it made any major difference. But at the end of the day, they showed up. They kind of complied with the mentality of be a good employee, be a good worker, do the thing that you're asked to do. Generally speaking, I don't think it was illegal, immoral, or unethical. They just showed up to work. They did the menial job. They didn't make a huge impact on the world. Like, I don't know what my grandfather's impact on the world was based on the work that he did for his whole life until he retired. I have no idea. I don't think he left an impact on the world with that. My grandmother just passed away this year, and she spent years working for one of the telco associates, one of the breakoffs from Ma Bell. Did she leave like a lasting impact on the universe? I don't think so. Not on that. Her lasting impact was that she had 8 children. And they all went out in the world and conquered and did things. One of whom is my mother, obviously. But that was the trade-off. The trade-off was you're a good worker, and then you're good. And as far as I can tell, they were good with their money, but she never wanted for anything. She lived at 96 years old. She was able to handle it. Can you do that now? Can you show up at your job without thinking or planning or being a financial genius? Can you show up and take care of children and be frugal and work within your means and then just know that you're going to be squared away and that you're going to basically be able to die without being penniless? Or does it take an awful lot of luck and maybe some significant skill that most people don't have? And wouldn't it be nice if somebody who was in the White House recognized that some people are struggling? It's tough. Or would you just go out there and tell them that everything's awesome, like that guy did with the adenoidal delivery, with the discrediting head shake nonstop, as the National Economic Council director? Here's your president.
But our country right now is doing better than it's ever done. You know, when I see polls on the economy, I should have 150%, not 100%.
Well, yeah.
Because we have the greatest. This is the golden age of America. What's being built now in this country has never, ever been built. And we are literally in the golden age of America. And I actually think people are starting.
We'll see 89 days.
We will see. Yes, we will. In 89 days, you get to find out what the narrative victory is. Do I think that the elections are real? No. Do I think that there's a media campaign to see what they can sell you and what they can pull off? I do. It's my ongoing supposition that while we don't have free, fair, or honest elections in any meaningful way, and you can't get the Save America Act through no matter what you do, which probably isn't going to solve the problem, but at least it's a step that says we care about what that problem is, that we recognize that the problem exists. By the way, who cared about what the problem was? It turns out that the president of the United States and the Republican Party that ran underneath him in 2024 did. Number 19 in the core promises that they made to the American people. There were 20 of them. Number 19, secure our elections. Same day voting, voter identification, paper ballots, proof of citizenship. Not that crazy. Not wild. Not even a little bit. What did we get? The most important election in our lifetime. What did we get? Woke up to this morning. Freaking shocking to me. I mean, it actually never fails to amaze. Most of you live on a calendar year that starts in January and it ends in December, right? In fact, actually, that's kind of the way that our Congress works. They get sworn in January, and then they serve for 2 years, and then it ends at the beginning of January, 2 years after they're sworn in, right? It's a 2-year cycle. That's how Congress plays. The federal government, for some reason, doesn't do that, though. They shut down their fiscal year in September. Those of you who've done government contracts or worked for the federal government know that at the end of September, especially going into September, the last couple of weeks, and we are getting to that time now, all of the money in the budget must be spent, or we won't get it again next year. For some reason, that's the mentality. I don't know what that means, but that's how they operate. Spend every single thing you can do has to be done right now. So if you have any money in your budget, you better sell it off. Yeah, so we're going to get jackets. We're going to get pocket knives. We're getting you flashlights. The office is going to get a sand rail. We're going to get some snowmobiles. Let's get some freaking snowmobiles, bro. Like, we don't need snowmobiles. We have nowhere to put the snowmobiles. Don't worry about where we put them. We're going to find another place to put them. They shut down the fiscal year at the end of September, which means the new budget for the federal government opens up on 1 October. You recognize that? And the 1st of October is the beginning of the year. So we are now in the budget crunch mentality where the people who run our country are shutting down their fiscal year and building up the next one, which is weird because most Americans are not doing that. We're living in a totally different cycle. We don't look at the close of the year until the end of December, like normal people would on a calendar year that starts in January and ends in December. So what is here? What is this? This is a Politico article. By the way, this is across the board on multiple different outlets. The Senate passes a bill to avert the October shutdown. Even the way that it's phrased is insane. The default position is that the government will shut down with no budget because even though Congress basically has no other function except approving and spending money, and the executive's function is to execute the funding or the spending in the way that Congress has delineated. Nope. The Senate has just passed a funding bill, and the funding bill, you guys are going to be absolutely shocked. It's a continuing resolution. Okay. For some reason, and I don't know if there's an agreement between the White House or the Republicans that are in power right now to not call it a CR right up front, but that's what they did. The Senate passed a bill Saturday to fund the government beyond the midterm elections, putting the onus back on the House to head off a shutoff that's looming on October the 1st because there is no budget. They've had all year. They've had since October 1st of last year to put together a federal budget and to approve it, to agree on what they're going to spend our money on at a huge level, trillions and trillions of dollars. And they've been doing bullshit hearings and they've been doing other nonsense. So now it's going back to the House, but the Senate has agreed to do a continuing resolution. And all it's going to do is punt the decision to set spending levels for fiscal year 2027. They're punting it to December 11th, which is right before Christmas. That's 2 weeks before Christmas. So they're going to slap it along, get it along, just get it out of here for now. So we can get to the midterms and not have a discussion about what we spent money on. We're going to continue the spending as there was already. And then right around Christmas, we'll have another discussion. But the problem is that it's Christmas. So people are focusing on Christmas stuff and whether or not they're even in work. Most people's schedules are radically disrupted. And they won't find themselves paying attention to the news cycle in the same way. We can see this, by the way. When people go on summer vacations, the news cycle dips. The audiences of all the podcasts everywhere. Daniel Bongino talked about it. It's the summer slump. June, July, August. People are starting to get back into the swing of things when they get back into school. They're on their kids' schedule, or maybe they're on sort of the it's hot outside so we can go and do stuff. And they do it again. There's two major slumps in the news cycle and awareness cycle of the American people. And these guys know this, by the way. That's why they're playing this. Right now, it's moving towards the high awareness time. We're moving 90 days out from an election. We are moving directly into the space where people are going to start paying attention to what's going on, back to school costs. They're getting ready to close out their year. As we get into we're ending Q3 and moving into Q4. So if we can just punt it right up to Christmas, that's the other slowdown over the new year. Christmas to New Year, nobody's paying attention to this stuff. All right, you guys have asked for the clip. Here's the clip. What's coming next? The Senate already told you what's coming next. They've decided to wait with a continuing resolution. You think the House will do a continuing resolution? Here's the compilation of the Speaker of the House who got his job on one promise only. No more continuing resolutions, no more omnibus bills, which is when they take all the spending for the federal government, they lump it into one huge spending package, and then we've got to be able to pass it because even though it's got a bunch of stuff we don't like, it's got the things that we need. We got to pay the military, we got to pay the government, we got to make sure the border is funded, blah, blah, blah. So they panic and they say, well, we've put them all in one thing. So we got 60% of what we like and 40% of the garbage, and that's a net win. Smithers, the assistant to Mr. Burns being Donald Trump in this case, I guess, has decided that we were never going to do anymore. Do you remember? This is the reason why George Santos owes me $100, by the way. Because when he got in, when Mike Johnson took the speaker's chair and stepped up, and they kicked out Kevin McCarthy, who was a rhino, and he was a California liberal Republican, and blah, 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 blah. He was a swamp creature and all this shit. When that happened, George Santos said, we're going to come back to you in a couple of weeks with single item appropriation bills. We're going to take the money that is tax dollars, and we are going to appropriate, or we are going to assign them to specific single item spending one at a time. That's what he promised. That was Mike Johnson's promise to America. We're going to go back now to 2023, coming up on 3 years ago. And I was pretty new in watching this at the time. And I knew it was bullshit in my first year. This has been my curse as a guy who does podcasts. If you see something that's really obvious to regular people, because you're a regular person like I am, and you see it before everybody else does in the punditry class, and it's not part of the approved messaging, you're not allowed to say this guy's full of shit when he's promising something when he didn't get a chance to deliver, even though you know he's full of shit because he's never going to deliver. So now, can we just agree? Can we just all get together and say, all of us that saw this right away, we were right, and George Santos owes me $100 with interest, which is worth nothing because it's been degraded by inflation, which was sticky, the sticky inflation. Mike Johnson, here you go.
Committed to never being in this situation again. I'm done with short-term CRs. We're resolved. So what that means is you're going to see in the beginning of this next year, we'll be walking and chewing gum at the same time. We're going to get the appropriations process running on time as it's supposed to be under law. The Budget Control Act of 1974 has very specific provisions in there on how this is to be done. Congress hasn't done that for as long as we can remember. But we're going to get back to that because that's good stewardship. The American people deserve it. And the debt situation we find ourselves in necessitates that. So, but overall, with the CR, as our leader just noted, we have broken the Christmas omni, and I have no intention of going back to that terrible tradition. So there won't be a Christmas omnibus. As somebody asked me in the hallway a little while ago, will there be many buses? We don't want any buses. We're not going to do any buses. Okay, we'll deal with that in the lame duck, and I'm going to plead, I'm going to urge the Senate to do their job. As Leader Scalise noted, they have not done that. This is Chuck Schumer's fault. It is not the House Republicans that we're in the position where we have to have a resolution to continue funding the government at the end of the fiscal year. We did our work. We passed 12 appropriations bills through the committee process in record time. We put them on the floor. Almost 73% of federal funding has been passed through the House.
Mr. Burns, everything's going so great, and you can tell that our numbers are great. This is in September of 2024. There will be no Christmas omnibus. There are going to be no minibuses. There are going to be no buses at all. We don't want to do any buses. Meanwhile, we're only doing buses.
We sent it all over to the Senate, and they've done nothing. They did not one bill, and they would not negotiate with us on the top line. So here we are. We loathe CRs as much as anyone, but this is the situation that the Senate Democrat leadership put us in.
Okay, even though last year I said we weren't going to do any more continuing resolutions, we are doing one, but this one is not our fault. This is somebody else's fault. We're going to put it on Chuck Schumer. So here we go. Now, how do they make the excuse when they're the ones who have the House and the Senate? It doesn't matter because they just do the same thing.
It would be political malpractice to shut the government down. I think everyone understands that. And so we hope that this will get done quickly and we get everybody back home to their districts to work and to the campaign trail.
This was the conservative play call. We don't normally like what's called a continuing resolution, a CR, but in this case it makes sense because if we push it into the first quarter of next year, then we have a Republican-controlled Congress and President Donald J. Trump back in the White House will be able to have more say over the funding decisions for 2025. Now, that would have been an easier thing to do, but then we had circumstances outside of our control. We had these emergencies that are required. So we had
Guys, these are circumstances outside of his control. This is December of 2024. So, obviously they couldn't control that.
As you know, a record hurricane season. We had Helene and Milton, and they just did massive destruction across our red states, frankly.
It used to be Chuck Schumer's fault, but this is God's fault.
In the southeast and the eastern side of the country. And then we've had farmers who are in jeopardy of permanently going under. They've had 3 lost years in a row because of Bidenomics and inflation and other circumstances outside of their control. And so when you cobble those two things together, there's a desperate need for that aid, and that's what adds another $100 $200+ billion to the bill, and that's why everybody's uncomfortable with it. I am too. We have a massive deficit and debt problem, of course, in this country. We can begin to address that and shrink the size and scope of government in January with Republican control, but we've got to bridge the gap to get there, and we cannot leave our small farms and ranchers and our people who are devastated by the hurricanes out in the meantime. So that's the difficult part about this. That's what people are really struggling with, and I am too, but we have a responsibility here, and that's legislating.
Well, this was a big vote on the House floor. The Republicans stood together, and we had one Democrat vote with us to do the right thing, and that is to fund the government. This was a clean CR. It freezes funding. It's a responsible thing to do, and we're ensuring that troops continue to get their paychecks and TSA agents continue to do their work and be paid, and essential workers on the border and elsewhere.
I'm shaking my head. We're going to get to some statistics to be able to cover down on what Mike Johnson said and what actually happens, and we'll do that in 1 second here. If you guys are watching on Rumble, give us a like. Give us a like over on YouTube. You may hear an ad on the audio platforms, and that'll come in right now. So turn down your volume if you need to. Okay. You can find the audio and the video if you're an audio listener and you want to be able to switch over to the video and see the lying face of Smithers and see how similar he is to Mr. Burns' assistants from The Simpsons. You can do so at KyleSeraphinShow.com. It's shocking. Once you see it, you'll never not see it. Let's do the clean CR. How many continuing resolutions have been passed by the American Congress, the American legislature, since November of 2023, when Mike Johnson stepped in and announced that there would be no more continuing resolutions? You guys ready? Hold on one more time. We're just going to play this real quick. I'm going to play, this is my cut 14. Check this out.
Committed to never being in this situation again. I'm done with short-term CRs. We're resolved. So with that.
Okay, November of 23, we're done with short-term CRs. How many have there been? Let's go. So, since November of 2023, there were 3 enacted on the 2024 fiscal year. They kicked the can down 3 times. November of 2023 when he was talking about it, another time in January of 24, and then in March of 2024. The next year, they did it in September. This is at the end of that fiscal year because it ends at the end of September. So they kicked it on the 26th of September. They did so again right before Christmas, the Christmas CR standard, December 20th of 2024. And then they did it again on March 15th. And then they did it again the next year. Last year, November 12th. Kicked it again, and July, and now we're doing it again. Okay? You guys want to know? He just talked about the fiscal shortfalls and the problems that we have, the issues. Oh, like I feel bad, but there was a national disaster. We had hurricanes, which happen every single year. We actually have a season called hurricane seasons when the weather can result in hurricanes. But those were acts of God, and so that's why we had to spend an extra $100 billion to make sure we take care of farmers, blah, blah, blah. Do you know how many people got screwed over and have been completely abandoned by the federal disaster services, FEMA, and so on? Do you want to know the crazy thing? He talked about how we have a big deficit, and so we're adding to the national debt. Just curious here. Hold on. I'm going to show you guys something. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, here we go. The United States added $6.19 trillion to its total national debt since November of 23, when Mike Johnson talked about stopping these types of things. We went from $33.7 trillion in national debt in November of 23 to just shy of $40 trillion. We're at $39.89 trillion in debt. Right? When people point out, like, and Mike Johnson's not a boomer. When people point out what's going on here, and when I told you that the amount of money that was spent while boomers controlled the government was such a crazy amount of money. It's like 3 times the deficit has been added in 30 years. Here's a radicalizing moment for you. I'm almost 45 years old. I'll be 45 at the end of this year. Okay? When they shut down the fiscal year, September 30th of 1981, just before I was born, we hadn't even reached a $1 trillion deficit in the United States. $998 billion was the U.S. national debt. Under $1 trillion. So in my lifetime, we have added $39 trillion in debt. And the entire time before I was alive, we just celebrated America's 250th. I'm less than 50 years old. In over 200 years, we almost racked up $1 trillion in national debt. And in 45 years, we've racked up almost 40 times that much. Now, you tell me that people that are younger than me in their 20s should just be eating ramen, and that'll solve the problem. You tell me that the people who are in charge are paying attention to those that are struggling and that they are getting some sort of media, like that the representation is somehow going to help them when this is the president of the United States and these are the poll numbers.
The question is, will they vote? Because a lot of them are very angry at Republicans, to be honest with you. They're
Why is
angry
that?
I don't know. I mean,
imagine saying that they're angry at Republicans. This is yet another time that I've seen Donald Trump distance himself from quote unquote Republicans and pointing out that he's actually not a Republican, which is fine. I don't think he's a Republican either. He's a 90s Democrat and he thinks of himself as not a Republican and he's the leader of the Republican Party. When you're the boss of the party and your party is failing and the first thing you do is say it's everybody else's fault, you're effed. You're straight effed. Find a leader that will not take responsibility for failure, and I will show you a system that cannot be saved.
they're angry at Republicans, but they're not angry at me.
Thing. Why?
They're not angry at me, but they are angry at Republicans.
Everyone's always angry.
And there are some.
Down there, the House Republicans are outrunning Donald Trump by 9 points, although they're both doing poorly. But the bottom line is this. When Donald Trump says that voters are angry at Republicans, not him, that, simply put, is not the case looking at the data. Voters who want congressional Republicans to do more to stand up to Trump or work with Trump. 56% say more to stand up to Trump. That's what they want congressional Republicans to do, compared to just 35% who say they want congressional Republicans to work more with them. As I said at the top here, what we're dealing with is Republicans are getting dragged down by Donald Trump, not the other way around. And indeed, among independents, what we're seeing is 65% they want them to say they want congressional Republicans to do to stand up to Trump.
Yeah. It was not maybe the most artful delivery of what that man had to say, but it's pretty straightforward, is it not? I don't know who's telling Donald Trump that people aren't frustrated with him, but they're frustrated with him. And it's inevitable because you promise something. You're not delivering that thing. People don't like it. And then you see headlines like this. This is the lead headline from ABC News this morning. Iran live updates. Why are we getting live updates on what's happening in Iran? Oh, because we have a war going on, despite the fact that the man ran on being the president of peace. He told you he is peace incarnate. He wanted a Nobel Peace Prize for his peaciness, but he's involved in a conflict with Iran. Don't you know, Seraphin, things on the ground can change. Yeah. No, I heard all the things that changed. What changed was that apparently Israel was going to strike Iran because they decided that was necessary. And the United States knew that we were going to get hit back on behalf of Israel's actions. So we decided to strike first. I got it. I played attention. I've listened to the president of the United States say it. I've listened to the Speaker of the House, Smithers, say it. And I've listened to the Secretary of State say this stuff. You can hear it. And there's no real key aspect that I can understand what's going to happen there other than it says we're going to continue this war because apparently the Israelis want it. So when people make the argument that Israel has outsized say in foreign policy, do I think the quote unquote Jews run the world? No, I don't. I actually don't believe that. You can believe that. I don't mind if you do. I just don't see evidence for it. I do see people having a very large outsized foreign policy influence on the way that the United States handles the Middle East because I was one of the people who cast a ballot for a guy who said that he was going to do no new wars. He did so right here. Prevent World War III. That sounds like not war. Restore peace to Europe and the Middle East. Oh, what are those conflict zones? One of those conflict zones was where Israel was dealing with Gaza. What was happening in, generally speaking, across multiple different places. There was Yemen and some others. We were going to have peace there. And then also Europe. By the way, we now have Ukraine sending missiles 700 plus miles deep into Russia and killing people. So turns out, I could just look at the promises that were made that weren't kept. And if you guys are new here, I had somebody reach out and they said, Kyle, good faith question for you. I've been following you since the beginning and I supported you since you testified in front of Congress. Red flag number one. I never testified in front of Congress. I say unpleasant things. They didn't want me to testify. So if you're like, I followed you and supported you during your congressional testimony, send me clips of my congressional testimony. I'm fascinated. I want to know what I said when I wasn't there in front of Congress. And Jim Jordan said that what you say is too politically hot because they're a bunch of cowards. But please, anyway, go on. And then he says, when did you first start doubting Donald Trump? I remember you being a supporter. Somebody who's been watching this program a while, let me know when I was a supporter of Donald Trump. Did I think he was the best of the two options? Obviously. Non-negotiable. The alternative was craziness. Have you ever seen me say that I thought Donald Trump was the answer to anything? Or did you say, Kyle said, we're going to have a choice. It's kind of like we're stuck in a false binary and we have to finish the game like Jumanji. That was one of my best analogies, by the way, if I do say so myself. The game Jumanji, which was a movie that Robin Williams was in, right? They started the game. We got to see it to the end. But nobody wants to play Jumanji. It wrecks the house. It smashes the library. It lets out some crazy hunter with a big old gun that's going to come and try to kill people. The monkeys are everywhere. The alligators are in your freaking balcony. Like they're climbing off there and there's water flying everywhere and the rhinos stampeded through your house. Like, remember? Yeah. Like shit is all broken, but we got to finish it out to get to the other end of it maybe. Okay, fine. Do I prefer that? No, I prefer someone that has governance, that's younger, that's not 80 years old, that's like been telling you that his bullshit business ideas are the best forever. Which he has been. This is the craziest part of this ABC headline. The U.S. is low-key negotiating. Man, take a boomer guy and toss him in and start using some Gen Z nonsense. He's low-keying the negotiations with Iran. That's what Donald Trump says. We're semi-negotiating. What the F are we negotiating for? We're back-to-back Iran war champions. Somewhere, I'm pretty sure I have a list of the timeline of the insane things that our current president has said about the number of times that we've won the Iran war and how we won it from the beginning. This is one of the lead headlines of the day. We're low-key negotiating with them. We're sort of semi-negotiating with them. We're willing to give up on all the things that we really wanted there, which apparently we didn't want originally, but now we do want. As long as they open up the strait, which was open before we started the bombing campaign. Donald Trump announced major combat operations against Iran on February the 18th. Then he announced that we won the next day. Delegations from the U.S. and Iran entered into negotiations in June. They had a huge signing ceremony and a bunch of bullshit saying, hey, it's incredible. The war is over and we've won. But we continue to exchange strikes in this kinetic ceasefire that was supposed to have a 60-day decision that was going to result in the end. Right now, Iran is focusing with Oman, not the American president and the American delegation, and they're working on whether or not they can work out sort of a passage where they can collect money on something they weren't previously collecting money on in the same way. All right. Okay. My buddy George Hill made a very dangerous comment this morning that I saw, and I can't unthink about it. By attacking Iran in the way that we did, and not immediately subduing them in the way that we did to Venezuela, we went from the American military has future technologies that can subdue your government and take your president out of his own bed overnight, and you can't do anything about it. We are invincible, and we are so technologically advanced that there's nothing you can do to stop us. That's what we learned in Venezuela. That was the message, was it not? Folks in the chat can comment on this thought. Did we point out that we have things that you can't handle? And nothing you can do will stop us in Venezuela. So people thought, this is incredible. We're good to go. And then February 28th rolls around, and Donald Trump takes that same mentality that we have untouchable, incredible capabilities that nobody else can rival. And he ran up into a brick wall of things that we have apparently been fighting for 47 years, but people realized was a lost cause for 47 years. And all the estimates said this wouldn't work out well. And so when he found out, guess what? It doesn't work out well. You go to war with Iran, you find out that it's a mountain fortress. You cannot eliminate all the people, and that it's been decentralized to the point where individual and autonomously radicalized people are going to keep fighting this thing on, and the people are not going to rise up because they're terrified, and maybe there's not enough people that actually want to rise up in the first place. So all your dissident numbers and your polling numbers and all your bullshit, it didn't turn out into anything real. And now your presidency is sunk because of it. You made a terrible choice. And what you've done, that is the most dangerous thing there is. It's the threat of of invincibility that's gone. You've now told second-rate and third-rate powers that the United States cannot wipe you off the globe in like 24 hours. That's what George pointed out. And all that does is make Americans less safe. Because if everybody believes that they're going to be steamrolled the first second that they open into a kinetic conflict with the American military apparatus, if they think that they go up against the American military, it's game over for them, it's lights out, it's 24 hours, and your president is sitting in a jail in New York City. If they thought that was the case, they'd be like, well, shit, we don't want to do that. And when you prove that somehow these people have been decapitated, striked, and we've beaten them over and over again, and their navy's at the bottom of the ocean, but they're still somehow able to negotiate tolls on a body of water they didn't previously even control before this started, you've exposed the myth of American invincibility. This is the same sort of danger that I pointed out with the Secret Service and the shot that took place at Butler. What that guy did at Butler is he exposed the myth of competency, because we all believe that there's this impervious force field around the American president and nobody can ever get through it. And the minute you go up against the Secret Service, you're instantaneously dead. Instantaneously. It's over for you. It's a suicide mission. You'll never walk away from it. And we've captured like 3 people since then who have tried to take a shot at the president or showed up with weapons. Yeah, they got the guy, Thomas Crooks, but only after he fired off a couple of rounds. And if he'd been any kind of a decent shot, he would have been successful. How scary is that? The myth of competency is you only are seen competent until you're tested, and then the competency is immediately proven to be a myth. And the myth of invincibility is the same thing we're dealing with right here. You've just shown that the American people are not behind it because you actually ran on the opposite. So they're not full scale trying to mobilize into let's go. Let's obliterate people, not the sort of way that we did when they ran and steamrolled Afghanistan. Of course, even after steamrolling Afghanistan, it took 20 years to hold on to it. How long did it take for American forces to pull out of Afghanistan before we lost everything that we had held on to? A week? The estimates were that it would take like at least a year or more, and the estimates were dog shit. In the same way that the estimates, whatever somebody was feeding to Donald Trump, was that we were going to steamroll these people and they're done. And gone. Those myths are very dangerous to Americans. Just in the same way it's very dangerous to believe that the Secret Service can't actually protect the president. Because you've now proven that they can go do anything they want. How about the myth that we have a governmental agency that is now focused, deeply focused on solving the problem of fraud? We have a fraud task force that has identified but not recovered $320 billion worth of American fraud. $320 billion in a task force that's headed by the vice president that does not include the director of the FBI, the agency that is tasked with finding fraud against the government, right? What if this entire system is actually held up because of the fraud? I read something the other day and it was just like kind of an offhanded comment and I went like, that hits kind of hard. Wouldn't it be interesting to find out that if you were to collapse the fraud and withdraw fraud from the way that our government works on this $40 trillion expenditure that we've done over the last 45 years. If you stop doing that, would the global system of whatever this bullshit is fall apart? The funny thing that I hear Alex Jones say all the time, and I hear him say this stuff, and like he doesn't always provide context because he's been saying it for so long.
Breaking exclusive.
Alex says something about the globalists, and he yells about it all the time. And you're like, that's kind of a catch-all phrase. It loses impact, kind of like talking about weaponized government. The first time you heard about a government being weaponized, you're like, holy crap. I've heard about weaponized African honeybees, but like a weaponized government, that sounds terrifying. Government that is turned into a weapon system. The idea of talking about globalists, and it's so accepted in the nomenclature right now that we don't even freak out about it. We're just like, oh yeah, globalists. A person that looks at the planet as their global domain because they are extra and supra governmental. They are above the capabilities of a government. They are beyond the limits of national boundaries. The idea that a person could be a citizen of the planet and all the countries in it because all the countries in it are subservient or below what they have for influence and power. That's the idea of a globalist. And we kind of lose that because the term is just kind of innocuous. It's not even that big of a deal. If the system is being built up, if you're a globalist and the system that you're interested in sustaining is multinational because you are so far above any individual nation's sort of parameters or jurisdiction. That's a scary ass thing to think about. And we've had numerous literary and we've had all kinds of thought experiments on how bad that goes. It's not good to imagine that somebody is completely unaccountable. It's a godless position to be in, by the way. Especially when you consider that we have an entire left wing of politics that takes people and makes them worship government. And that government isn't even the highest god in the pantheon of leftism, apparently. Think about that for a second. And then consider that if it's all basically run on defrauding little old you from the little old amount of money that they pull from your little old paycheck, but they do it in aggregate against 300 or 350 million people in this country. If fraud and defrauding you individually over and over and over again of the money that you're bringing in and then printing off your money and turning your money into dog shit anyway, if that's the entire system, do we even want the system to be surviving? This was the other question I saw someone ask. Like, well, what's the answer? The answer is insulate yourself so that when all this house of cards gets knocked over by the wind or the oscillating fan that comes blowing through, as is known to do, it's pretty straightforward. If you're a nation under judgment, at some point in time, like the bill comes due, and the bill is almost always paid in blood. So how do you survive it? What's the mark on the door you put so the angel of death passes over your house? Some of it is just preparedness. And that's why I focus in on the F's that I talk about in this program. Faith, family, fitness. What are you guys doing for fitness? Are you guys doing that one hard? Are you running and praying at the same time? Are you thinking about faithfulness and getting your cardiovascular up? It is like an obsession with mine right now. I'm obsessed with trying to run multiple 6-minute, 6:30 miles at 45 years old. And I'm way heavier than I ever was before. Because I know that my physical fitness directly relates into the survivability of my family. And firearms is another piece of it, yeah. And food storage is relevant. We've had sponsors on the show that represented that position. Like none of those are proactive things that I'm projecting on the world, you know? That's the craziest thing. Everybody that's selling you a solution, if you do this thing that you can influence the outside world, then it'll all be okay. That is the most prideful and stupid and short-sighted thing I've ever heard. If we just put the right candidates out there, then we can regain the system. Sorry, the system is so broken, I don't know that it can be repaired. You've taken wheels, which are meant to roll, and you've turned them into something completely different. They're now underneath and they're skids. And you're trying to push rubber. When you change the nature of what a thing does in the system, you change the system. And we've changed the system dramatically. So we can have fun with it. We can laugh about it. But I'll tell you what, you can show up early to church and pray the rosary at your Catholic Mass. You can pray for safety for your family and your loved ones in your community. Like I don't see any other way out of this thing because here's the piece. It appears that most of the system is built up on fraud, even if it's not all of it. There's so much like innate fraud that is accepted. I listened to the guys when I was applying for a job with the VA. This is when I was working at the FBI. So I'm in government. I have a government job. It's supposed to be a safe place to retire from. Join the government. Never have to worry about employment again. It's your last job interview in your life. People said that stuff when I was at the FBI Academy. I'm so glad I got my last job interview done. It's like, I didn't believe that there. I didn't believe it then. I went home and told my wife, and I'm like, this is going to be a hell of a 20 years if I can pull it off. We're going to have to do it 1 year at a time. And I don't know that I'm going to be in this job for 20 years because I think these people are full of shit. It feels like they're lying to us at the academy. It's the best job in the world. I've never had another job, but it's the best job in the world. It's like, you don't have a lot of experience. The best job in the world that I ever had, hands down, financial analyst at a movie studio. It was epic. For the time in my life, it was way better than being an FBI agent. By like not even close, not even comparable. And I lived in California where I couldn't carry a gun every day, and it was still better. I tried to go to the VA. I tried to take my skill set from the FBI to the VA to be a special agent in their Office of Inspector General, which looks for fraud in let me see what the VA budget is. I want to say it was like $300 billion. What is the budget of the Department of Veterans? Yeah. By the way, the funniest thing, it just popped up. It says, what's the budget of the Department of Education? Which, by the way, still exists, which was supposed to be gone. The VA's budget, this is actually worth showing. Here's the VA's budget, guys. It's $488.2 billion in 2027 coming up. 480, it's $500 billion is the budget of the VA. There are less than 1,100 people, to include analysts, gun carriers, actual investigators, supervisors. The entire mechanism for the Office of Inspector General for the VA is less than 1,100 people. $500 billion. And they wouldn't hire me. But when you consider that the oversight there is this big, they told me that they had millions and millions of dollars in fraud. One specific example, they're like, yeah, we found out that this person was doing an equine therapy bill. They were sending the government a bill for $5 million a year for equine therapy, taking horses and putting vets around it. Put vets near horses, the energy of the horse, the riding of the horse, the connection with an animal, being in nature, all that stuff. The problem was that $5 million a year was going to a California scam couple that owned a property that was the size of a postage stamp. It was like 0.18 acres, and they owned no horses. And they got away with this for several years, apparently. The amount of fraud that is committed against the American people is absolutely staggering. And rather than us spend all of our time policing the fraud, we just spend more money, to the point where you can see here, there was an increase of 7.7% from the previous year's budget for the VA. So we're going to spend more money, and it's going to go into more bullshit. I'll play you a clip. I think it's from Fox News. Yeah, it's from Fox News. They're talking about fraud. They're talking about one tiny little bit of fraud, and it involves 1.2 million people getting government healthcare benefits that did not qualify for that healthcare benefit, some of whom were illegal aliens. What is a healthcare benefit worth to somebody? Is it $1,000? Is it $10,000? I bet you it's more. I bet you it's worth probably $15,000 to $50,000 per fraudulent person that's not allowed to get this thing. That would be the best bet. So we're going to do a number like 10,000, and we're going to see what this looks like. You ready? I'm going to do the math real quick.
A nonprofit health policy research group finds that 9.2 million adults, that's nearly half of those enrolled in Obamacare Medicaid expansion program, do not even meet the federal requirements to qualify. How did this happen, and how do we know? Connor Hansen live on Capitol Hill with more. Hi, Connor. Good morning.
Hi, Dana. Good morning. Well, this study says some of those people actually make too much money to qualify for this Medicaid expansion program, and others are getting these benefits even though they're here in the country illegally. Now, this study was put together by the Paragon Health Institute, which is run by a former advisor to President Trump. He's alleging widespread fraud here. He says more than 9 million people, as you mentioned, close to half of those using the Medicaid expansion program under Obamacare should not qualify. The report given to Fox Business ahead of a hearing here on Capitol Hill says pandemic-era policies supercharged the issue.
We compared Medicaid expansion enrollment by state to the total number of people who would be eligible for that coverage, have income below those thresholds by state, and found a massive problem.
According to the study, fraud in the program costs taxpayers $32 billion each year, and people who really do need regular Medicaid could be paying the price the most. The study says New York and California have some of the biggest problems, claiming up to 62% of people enrolled in California are not eligible, and the states might not even be incentivized to fix the issue.
California actually gets 9 times more funding for an expansion enrollee than a traditional enrollee. That is perverse. The federal government is effectively discriminating against the most vulnerable.
And Brian Blais, who you just heard from, will be here on Capitol Hill tomorrow testifying to the Senate Budget Committee. He told me one of his recommendations will be to have stronger verification for anybody trying to enroll in Medicaid. Dana.
Sounds like something that's needed. Connor, thank you.
Well, that sounds amazing, Connor. Thanks so much for giving us that great information. $32 billion in fraud. Well, it's just another day here in America. What was the total national debt when I was born? 998 billion. I did quick numbers on it. If there's 9 million participants that are not qualified or eligible for what that thing is, and that is all fraud, and it was worth $10,000 per person, it'd be 90 billion. So I don't know where they came up with $32 billion, but those are always pretty, those are pretty tight little estimations. It could be worth a lot more than that too, because that's assuming that these are one thing. On the worst end, I ran some calculations, just a couple of numbers. If it was worth, I don't know, let's say like it was worth $50,000 a year for people. And some of these benefits probably are. We're talking over $100 billion, a tenth of the national debt when I was born. And now it's just a rounding error because our system is so enormous. But yeah, sure, you're going to vote your way out of this with a system that doesn't even work. You're going to vote your way out of it with people who keep doing the same thing with your time and your money. They're going to show up and they're going to run around. They're going to pass the Save America Act. I don't know. Let's just do a break here. Let's just think about this for a second.
Tired of gas prices? Tired of the war? Come see it. Introducing Trump Cruise to Hormuz. We got Mar-a-Lago face babes, Kid Rock, YMCA, but not gay, McDonald's 24/7. Nobody's done that on a boat. It's safe, it's beautiful, and kids eat free. Now look, the war costs every family $1,000. You're already paying. So for $4,000 more, you're on the boat. Call in the next 10 minutes. We'll throw in a second week. Nobody's leaving anyway. Great deal. Call now.
Total conflict cost estimated $600 million. Cruise fare non-refundable. In the event of escalation, entertainment schedule continues as planned. Straight conditions may vary.
Straight conditions may vary. You guys want to go cruise the Hormuz? Does that sound like fun? I don't think AOC is going to do it. She's busy saving her eggs for a potential presidential run or maybe the Senate run in 2028. Nobody really knows what she's up to. There was a video of her that she was injecting herself. People were like, oh, is she doing GLP-1? She's looking a little heavy. I don't think she's heavy. That's just the claim. I mean, she's a female in her 30s. So she looks like a female in her 30s. She should be a mom already by that age. I had my wife and I had our first child at 36, which was totally late.
Tired of gas?
Donald Trump got me. Pushed the wrong button. 36, first babies. And we were like, why did we wait so long? And then I remember, it's like, we waited so long because we bought into all the garbage that is being sold. And we bought it at a rate that other people did not. I know friends that are still waiting to get married. They're still wondering, is marriage right for me? AOC's in that boat right now, it sounds like. She doesn't want to marry the guy she's with, but she's apparently, remember they made a big deal about how she was engaged? Some like weird looking ginger guy with some weird toes that he had put out, and he looked kind of effeminate. And she was fighting her own battles. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's not ruled out a presidential run. Do you know what an unserious nation we would be if we had AOC as a decent contender for president? As though Democrats haven't learned their lesson that running women who have no business being in positions that are not smart and are not capable, like they should somehow be in charge. But she's freezing her eggs. There's like everything bad in one place there. Number one, I don't think she should be elected to anything. She's not that bright. Number two, she's revealed the longer it goes on how not bright she is. Number three, she's made terrible life choices and she's now trying to fight biological reality. Awful, sad. And then the more you expose and let her talk, like the dumber she ends up sounding. Here's Kamala telling you about the Save America Act. This should be like the arbiter. It's like, hey, can we run a kind of a ditzy, somewhat attractive looking or like interestingly ethnic woman? Can we run a ditzy ethnic woman and win? And the answer would be like, no, you can't do that. You tried it with Hillary and she was generically white lady and she was fake and that didn't work. You ran in Kamala, that didn't work. Maybe AOC would do it. Maybe if it was just a younger ditzy person. Let's see here.
This SAVE Act, which basically would require that for people to register to vote, you're going to have proof of who you are through a passport, which a lot of Americans don't have, or a birth certificate. Same point.
A lot of Americans don't have a birth certificate because they weren't even born. You need a birth certificate to do anything to prove who you are. What is she even talking about? And by the way, if you have a birth certificate, then you can get a passport. That's how that works. You just have to show where you were born in America, right? Isn't that how that works? Am I crazy? You know what was missing from there is the cackles, the drunken cackles that were part of the campaign that she did when they selected her to be their nominee and they didn't have a primary for her and they just put her in because the other guy was dying. Who, by the way, apparently Joe Biden is dying of cancer. Hunter Biden is out there talking. He did a Tucker Carlson show. This is where Tucker Carlson doesn't shine. It's like I'm sure that Hunter Biden is an interesting person. I knew a bunch of people that were weirdo, druggies and had strange life experiences, and they're fascinating. But maybe not if you're trying to be the top person talking about values in America. I'm not sure Hunter Biden and making him more accessible to people is necessary. Also, zero sympathy for Joe Biden. None. I'll feel the same way about Donald Trump when he's gone too, by the way. I just won't care. It's like, you want me to not care? Act like a scumbag and a criminal, promise things, then do evil things while you have power. It's a pretty good way for me to not care about you. I couldn't care less what happens to you. You lived a charmed life. You got to experience all of the benefits of wealth and privilege and power on this earth. That turns out to be pretty damning in the afterlife if you've read anything. If you like, what do they say? Harder than a camel passing through the eye of a needle. I'm kind of just like fixated on that little thing. It's like, and they got their reward here on earth. Wouldn't want to be on the other end of that. I want nothing that guy has. I don't want to go straight. I don't want to go cruise the Hormuz either. Anyway, I'm sad about reading these things. Like one day I want to wake up and be like, hey, is there really good news? Is there awesome information? Are we going to turn it around? One of the ways you would turn it around is that you would actually tighten your belt and you would do austerity, which is kind of what I thought Donald Trump was promising. Like nobody gets excited about higher interest rates to be able to combat inflation. It'd be nice to know. It's like, okay, well, the grownups are in charge and the grownups are saying that what we need to do is stretch some things. If someone said you have to put less meat on your burrito, it's going to be too expensive. We're going to have to tighten our belts. We're going to have a hard period because we're going to try to straighten things out. That's not what's happening. The Fed was going to hike interest rates in September. Now they're not going to do it because it would be the hard thing to do. It was a dismal job report where again, look at this. Guys, I'm not making this up. Employers unexpectedly shed 2,300 jobs. 2,300 families were devastated, but their jobs were shed. On Friday, the Department of Labor revised down hiring data for May and June. Do you remember Steve Friend saying that? Anyone say that? Steve Friend said for the last 24 of 25 quarters, they have downward revised after the fact. They announced job numbers and then they downward revised them afterwards. The federal government announces really good information and then they're like, sorry, we were lying to you. Watch this. The latest employment figures suggest the labor market may actually be weaker than previously thought. This has been the case for literally years. On Friday, the Labor Department also revised down hiring data for May and June, a combined 103,000. It suddenly made everything wobbly. It's like, no, you just gave statistics that were rosy colored bullshit and everybody knew what the situation was because people are living it. Actual human beings are living it. And then other people are telling everybody that it's fine.
But our country right now is doing better than it's ever done. You know, when I see polls on the economy, I should have 150%, not 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Because we have the greatest. This is the golden age of America. What's being built now in this country has never, ever been built. And we are literally in the golden age of America. Literally. And I think people are starting. I actually think people are starting.
We'll see 89 days.
When he says 89 days, we'll see if your narrative holds up. I don't know how people that believe what Donald Trump just said, and there are tons of people that claim to believe that. I don't know if they're just deluding themselves or if denial is just a river in Egypt or what. But there are people who present themselves as acting like that is actually true. And if that's where you're standing and you're like, yep, we're actually literally in a golden age, and this is the best time that it's ever been to be American. it tells me that you're either historically ignorant, you don't know anything about the way that America used to be, you don't know what made America great, so you can't make it great again, I suppose. That's possible. I guess that's possible. Or you are so detached from reality and your family has been rug pulling tens of billions of dollars out of the economy that maybe it is the golden era, but only for the people that you care about. And the people you care about is just like a couple of people that you can see on a regular basis. Maybe that's what's up. The only light that I see, and this is really one of them, this is the only thing that I see, is that people are starting to say, you can't fool me again with the lessons that we learned post 9/11. You're not going to sell me another Patriot Act. You're not going to tell me that we all need to be under surveillance and that if you have nothing to worry about, then it's not a problem for the government to be looking into you. You're not going to be able to do those things today because there's a growing group of people with some malcontent that are saying, this is not for me. This is, I'm going to play you back to back. One is going to be a woman explaining to you the issues she has. She's in the similar age bracket to me within a couple of years as a quote unquote elder millennial, they call it. I think I'm a millennial by like a couple of months, but I get it. I'm on that cusp of people that are old enough to see younger people still in sort of like the millennial category. And I remember when people were pointing out that millennials were pieces of garbage, and I didn't take offense to it then. This is my news for people who are in the baby boomer generation, since I started off talking about that. There was a lot of punching going on into quote unquote millennials about 10 years ago. I watched it over and over again. And I was like, technically, I guess that's me, except technically I don't fit into any of the things they're talking about. So if it doesn't land on you, don't take offense at it. Consider the broader argument being made. And the argument being made then was that a bunch of children who grew up where everyone got a trophy and being told that they were good enough, even if they didn't actually compete at a level that was successful, and a bunch of other kind of like, weak parenting things that resulted in weaker people. If that's a problem, and it is a problem for people in that generation, then like own it. Figure out how to fix it. Figure out how to be better. Nobody was talking about then that the parents of those people were to blame for that. That's fine. So we see a broader category, like we all carry blame. But to say that just pull yourself up or like, ignore the fact or eat ramen, let them eat ramen, you're going to see disconnect. And I think it's going to be a very dangerous disconnect. And the only thing that I see coming out of it is, broadly speaking, narratives like just give us access to all your information and tracking of your vehicle and tracking of your phone and tracking of your car and so on and so forth. Make sure that you just aren't doing anything wrong and then you've got nothing to worry about. The government will always work on your favor. All of us who lived through COVID recognize that our government is made up of people, and those people are going to do what they're told overwhelmingly. 90% of people, 81% of people, it's hard to say whether it's 80 or 90% said, yes, I'm going to go get these shots because I'm told to, and I just follow what I'm told. But the vast majority of people will do what they're told because it's easier. That they will choose convenience, they will choose ease, they will choose subservience over like the really ugly path, which is that it's going to cost you something if you want to be free. Probably more than most people are willing to pay. There's a woman kind of like empathizing with the younger group.
So as an older millennial, I'm part of the generation that has been, screaming from the rooftops about how expensive life is right now, right? We don't have enough for retirement. We don't have enough in savings. And we're constantly told by the older generation or parents' generation, boomers, that we're just spending too much, right? It's our spending habits. If we just stop buying Starbucks and stop eating out so much, like we'll have all the money we need. And like, while some of that might be true, I had 2 instances today that was just a reminder on how out of touch that older generation is with the cost of everyday items. So I'm at the grocery store, I'm in the parking lot. On the way here, I was on the phone with my mother. She had some doctor's appointments, I had some doctor's appointments. We were kind of updating each other, and we were talking about my toddler and how we're potty training her and like how excited I am to no longer have to buy diapers. And I said to her, can you believe that a box of diapers costs $45? And it was silence. And she went, $45? Yeah. She goes, whoa. Like, it hadn't even occurred to her how expensive diapers are these days. And rightfully so, right? Like, she hasn't bought diapers in 40 years. So like, it didn't even occur to her how expensive an everyday necessity item like that actually is right now. And then I was coming out of the grocery store. Now I've got a trunk full of groceries, right? This is going to last us probably about 2 weeks. Some things will probably run out of sooner. It was about $450 worth of groceries. It was a full cart of groceries. And I'm walking out, and these 2 older women are next to me. I would put them like maybe late 70s, early 80s. They're very sweet ladies. And they said, oh wow, you got a lot of groceries to put up, right? And I look over, and they've just got like a few items in their cart. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's like a family of 4. And again, it reminded me, like, they have no idea how much it costs to feed a young family of 4 right now, right? Like, They only have to worry about their couple of little groceries, and then that's it. Like, they probably, if I told them I just spent $450 on groceries, their mind probably would be blown, right? And that's food and groceries, and we're talking like fresh produce. It's not like I get my kids the junkiest stuff, right? We've got meat and produce and milk and all that kind of stuff in there, and diapers and all these things that are a necessity. That older generation, like, they just don't realize how expensive all of this stuff is.
Right? It adds up. It gets tough. And if you're disconnected, and people like Donald Trump, who haven't been into a grocery store and had not shopped for groceries maybe in his whole life, I'd be fascinated to learn if Donald Trump has ever done his own grocery shopping. I don't think he has. So for all that sales pitch, which I recognized I did this moment where I was doing my biggest nightmare is that my car is going to break and I'm going to have to take it to somebody to go mess with it. And we've been incredibly blessed, or maybe we do good maintenance locally, but my vehicle's never had to go into the shop. My wife's minivan has never had to go in the shop. And it was throwing all these warning codes over the weekend. This is the second time it's done it. The first time I was able to blow out all the sensors with an air gun and kind of went around and kind of made sure that was working. And this time it was like the brake light indicator was off, the engine indicator was going on, the turn signal, whatever failure, the evap system, like all the warnings are going off. They're all going. And I was like, oh crap. Like, I know that it's a sensor. It's a sensor issue. The car runs fine. Like, son of a gun, the damn computer. So I was like, well, I'm going to reset the ECU. I'm going to take the engine control unit and I'm going to empty it of power. I'm going to let it run. So I turn it all off. I disconnect the battery. I let it sit for 10 minutes. I run all the engine power out by punching the button a few times because we don't even have a freaking key to start it. And then I punch it back in, get it started up, goes away. All the codes go. So I drive it. I want to go get 10 miles on it to make sure I let my wife drive it again. I want to make sure that it's appropriately been reset. It seems okay. I'm driving around with it. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, there were people that are now with their eyes wide open. They believed that the guy who pitched himself as a blue collar billionaire and somebody who was outside of the system and a dude who was really going to be a disruptor of the system, who was really going to come in there and do something different. He claimed all these things. And then we suddenly realize Donald Trump is exactly like every other politician that's ever been in the game. Big promises, minimal delivery. We're not going to do another CR. We're not going to do any more omnibuses. We're not going to do any more minibuses. We don't like buses at all. Proceeds to do 9 of them over the next couple years. Mike Johnson, slimy, greasy, campaigns on values and Christianity and other things, ends up being just a slimy swamp creature. Right? What's the difference between Donald Trump? Made claims, sounded great, connected with voters, turned up, massive disappointment. So that's one group of people. The people who were like, oh, we voted for a guy who said he wasn't a politician and he lied. He was a politician. He did what politicians do. They make claims and they don't back them up. Bummer. I can recover from that. You can recover from that. That's just recognizing a pattern. You just go, yeah, the pattern is just the pattern. The pattern is people get into office under big claims and then they don't carry them out. The status quo continues. We can't vote our way out of this, period. Okay, so that's one way. The other people go, it's just almost on the edge, or you're not believing in Donald Trump enough to make Donald Trump manifest the things that Donald Trump wants to give to me. Those people can't be saved at all, ever, because they've fallen into idolatry. And that's essentially what there was a big debate. It was a MAGA versus America First thing. It was hosted by Brandon Straka. They invited me to be part of it. I opted out, folks. I said, no, thanks. I'm not willing to have a debate with people about something that's obvious. It's not negotiable that the guy failed to give you information. And there's no amount of believe harder or people who believe harder that I want to talk to. I don't care. I'm not trying to convince them. I'm going to be building my bunker. My bunker is a metaphorical bunker. It's not a physical bunker. It's one of faith and family and fitness and firearms capabilities. These are like tangible skills that I can do, but I can't transfer them. They're not something I can store away or stash up. So that's where I'm at. And that actually is a solution, by the way, and it is within your grasp. That is empowering. To believe that you could just get enough people to vote the way that you want, if you could just take over your local Democrat or Republican party in your own little county and you could make them have the candidates that you want. Like, no, none of that. That's nonsense. And deep down, I think most people actually recognize that, which is why we're getting to this point where our default position of distrust is getting very healthy. One of the craziest things that I've seen is the CBS movement towards propaganda on behalf of the, I don't know what the hell it is, the authority of the federal government. Barry Weiss stepped in. I made a comment about it. Let me just show you let me show you my research, or not my research, but let me just show you my notes on this. The woman I'm about to show you a video of, who's arguing on behalf of flock cameras, which is a truly wild position to hold. She was in high school in 2019. She graduated college in 2023. She is a child. I hope we can agree on that. This is a child. Her job as a reporter at the Free Press is her first job, as far as I can tell. It's actually absurd. She's listed as the chief of staff, but she was in college during that time. Columbia Daily Spectator, reporter, assistant, Free Press, 5 years with the. She's a child. To the point where her resume has student facilitator while she was in high school and high school intern while she was in high school, and that was in 2019. Interestingly enough, she also advocated for Holocaust education requirements in Washington State. So I don't know what that's about, but the people that have that on their resume tend to be Jewish, for whatever it's worth. And she works for a secular, lesbian, Jewish woman from or in New York, Barry Weiss. And she's advocating on behalf of Flock. I'm going to give you the silver lining as we leave here. So here is she's very pretty. She's, I don't know, this feels like almost gratuitous, the amount of like fixation on her. Just, maybe it's just me, but this instinct of women wearing like minimal clothing or super tight clothing and then being on camera. Here's this young lady who just got out of high school telling you that Flock is really good for you. And then I'm going to play the alternative.
Do you ever feel like you're watched? That's the panic behind a new fear sweeping across America. People are freaked out about surveillance from our employers, our nanny cams, and our phones watching our every move. And right now, this anxiety is being taken out with electric saws and cans of spray paint on tools used by law enforcement to keep us all safe. The target? Flock safety cameras.
Guys, these are just tools used by law enforcement to keep us all safe.
In New York, someone cut down a Flock safety camera with an electric saw. In Oakland, California, another was covered in paint. And in Idaho, someone rammed one with their truck. And in good old Florida, a man just sits in his lawn chair with a cardboard held up for the lens. Since January, roughly 23 cities have canceled their contracts or shut off their Flock camera over Fourth Amendment concerns. There's even an open source intelligence website, DFlock, that's finding these cameras so people know exactly where to vandalize them. Here's what's actually under attack. In 2025 alone, the system helped locate 10,000 missing people, about 27 people a day, or about one every hour. Over 40% of agencies said Flock helped recover over half of the stolen vehicles in their jurisdiction. In Indiana, an infant abducted at a shopping center was found in under 2 hours. In Ohio, a missing girl was located in under 30 minutes. And this is the tool that people are treating like the enemy. It is fair to have concerns about how companies use and track our data, but that's not what these cameras are for. To be blunt, they're not interested in you, unless you're a kidnapper, a thief, or someone who intends to do harm.
That's from the Free Press. That's their official editorial position. Guess what? If you're a pretty, single, skinny young lady running around in New York City, I can imagine why you might want government surveillance, because you don't have the things that you're supposed to have to be able to protect you. And if you weren't in the workforce, you'd be doing what my wife is doing. You'd be at home, taking care of babies, driving around in your minivan, making sure that it still works. My wife is in minimal danger. The only thing that Flock represents is we're going to watch you for your safety, and the we don't want surveillance. We don't need this sort of overwatch. It's winning slowly because that's the major difference that can't be accounted for. A independent press that is not being taken over by whatever sort of like the blobby governmental apparatus, the access base, or whatever the heck it is that causes these people to say, we're going to tell you things that are so obviously Orwellian. There's no reason that you should believe anything we're saying, and yet we're going to purvey it, and we're also going to be able to make money doing so. That's crazy to me, that it's still a real business model to be able to sell government sycophancy, but it is. The difference is there's a lot of people that just go, maybe not. Maybe take that shit down. We're not into it. So here's your light moment for the day. Chandler, Arizona, for those of you living in the Phoenix area. They're done with Flock. They said, block you.
Good afternoon. We recognize the substantial interest in the City of Chandler's automated license plate reader technology, and so we're here today to discuss some issues, and then we'll take some questions afterwards. After careful consideration, city leadership has decided to discontinue the use of flock cameras in Chandler. The City Council will not pursue a renewal of our service agreement with the vendor at this time. Accountability, transparency, and public trust are among the core principles of a high-functioning police department, and they guide decision-making at every level of our organization. Having said that, this week, for the first time in nearly 3 years, a proactive audit system flagged an anomaly in the flock system, which was used by a member of our department.
An anomaly. Wait, more cops abusing this tool? Turns out that's a thing.
As a result, we immediately launched an internal investigation to determine exactly what happened. Part of that investigation will be to determine if flock was used inappropriately, and if so, discipline will follow. It's important to underscore the fact that our own accountability systems caught this anomaly, which demonstrates that our systems of accountability are working as intended. And though we are still very early in the investigation, we can say with certainty that nobody's privacy has been compromised as part of this potential misuse. Nonetheless, any potential misuse of the flock system is something that we must take seriously. I want every Chandler resident, visitor, and business owner to know that no law enforcement tool is more important than the trust you place in us every single day.
What? Do you guys want a translation from government speak? Holy shit. We found out that it was somebody who did something. As we investigate, we're going to find out that a bunch more people did it. We can't admit that that happened. And because we can't admit it, what we're going to do is remove the thing that would otherwise have you look into how much we screwed up. That's how that works. That's what government speak is. No one's individual privacy has been compromised. Translation, oh my God, if they found out what was going on, we're going to shut this program down now. When somebody misuses a tool, you're not like, hey man, Jim is not properly trained on using the Sawzall, so we're going to get him some training and then we're going to go out there and we're going to keep using the Sawzalls. If they're like, all Sawzalls are now removed from the work site, it means the Sawzall actually operates as like a ballistic knife. And so it's going, and then like one of them flies off and it lodges itself in someone's heart. And you're like, oh, well, you just killed a guy with a Sawzall. Maybe we'll do no more. When somebody tells you that they're removing a tool that is otherwise very useful, and we caught it, nothing was compromised, and don't worry about it. Like, you should panic about what bad things just happened in Chandler under that system. You know what they found on the back end of that thing? Damning, like things that would make people riot. That's usually what happens. And then they let it out slowly. They're like, oh, on a more of a deep investigation, we found that they were in fact not just one, but multiple misuses of this thing. But don't worry, none of your data was compromised. And then it's like a year later, they're like, it turns out on further investigation, everyone's data was compromised and we're totally effed. How do you know that, Seraphin? Because I study people lying to us all the time. Like, so do you, by the way. Every one of you who heard that were like, oh, crap. Yeah, he's right. In the same way that the jobs numbers were really good, but the economy actually turns out to be a little bit wobblier because 103,000 jobs were just created out of nowhere. Why Sawzall, Kyle? Because Sawzalls are the tool that you might use against a flock. That's what you would use. That's not what I would use. I would use a Suppress 22. I would use a Suppress 22 from distance, and I would use a thermal sight or some sort of an IR that recognizes the IR on the camera. I'm in talks right now with a steel target manufacturer that may or may not be able to create a replica steel target, the exact size and shape and dimensions of the camera, of a flock camera. We may or may not offer those in the future if somebody wants to choose to make them. I don't know if you guys want a precision rimfire target that looks like a flock camera, but I think it makes sense. And if so, we'll try to create that. That was my original idea. If you steal my idea, I'll be bummed out, but also it's okay if you steal it. All right, that's what we got for today's program. I hope you guys had fun. Again, there is a victory, which is that if you just stop putting up with this crap, then it does stop at some point. It stops locally, though. We're not going to fix it nationally. Chandler is going to recognize that the people of Chandler are not going to put up with this crap. The people of the United States, broadly speaking, got COVID shots. So we kind of already know how that works, right? Just saying. All right. Have a fantastic start to your week. Sorry that I got off to a little bit of a late start. I look forward to seeing you guys and see where this one goes. I will download some very amusing and otherwise silly palate cleansers. For today, it's the chief of the Chandler Police cleansing your palate. Even if he lied to us, he kind of told us something good. No more flocks in that area. Best of luck as you're out there in the world. Go work on your fitness. I'm going to go get a 3-mile in, and I'm going to see if I can negative split it and do 2 of them under 7 minutes. I'm aspiring to be a top tier 45-year-old dad athlete. God bless, guys. We'll see you on the other side.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.